I come up into the light with nothing in my hands, and Marek has already stopped counting. He stops flat, at the same speed he stops for everybody, as though one number costs him what the last one cost him. 22, he says, and he says it to the boats and not to me. A man is 30. I am 22, and my chest is still folding itself up, and my mouth tastes of the brown water down there. Vel came up first this morning with his stone still warm in his fist, and 4 boats banged their oars on their own gunwales for him. Nobody is banging anything now. My brother is looking at the water like the water owes him a word. It was not my lungs. At 2 body lengths the light goes brown and stops being light, and my hands went out ahead of me into nothing at all, and a man will not swim into what he cannot see. On the shore my mother stands where the dry sand stops, and she does not come down onto the wet. You come down onto the wet for a man. They vote in the afternoon, which is generous of them, and Vel puts his hand up with the rest and then takes the oars as well. Doing it yourself looks like honor. Tog owns the boat that goes out to the burn, an oar with a split blade he will not replace, and a price for everything said out loud whether anybody asked. 1 ladle to carry a message, half a ladle to carry a boy. Then he tells me the island feeds itself and laughs at it, and he has been working on that one for 400 crossings. The burn is black from the waterline up, a ridge of cinder along the top, and a cliff at the north end so full of birds that the noise reaches you before the smell does, and there is no wood on it anywhere, and no spring. I go up past the wet, put my hand into the beach and let it run out through my fingers, and then I do it again slower, because the first time I did not believe it. It is clean, almost no shell, nothing that turns to clay under heat. 20 years at a furnace and nobody ever handed me sand this good, and here is a beach of it under people who think it is what is left when a thing has finished dying. 151 is the count, and they say it every morning. 1 cistern cut into the rock above the beach with a stone lid on it, and a woman sitting where she can watch the lid. She pours half a ladle into my hands and watches my hands the whole time I drink. Half until the rain, she says. Half for everybody. She asks me my name and I give it to her, and she says cure once, to fix it, and then does not use it again for a month. They call her Mother Salt, and nobody offers me the other name, and she holds the cistern, so she holds every person standing on this beach. Tog collects before he shoves off, because the burn pays him in water. He lifts his ladles off the top with his own hand, and then takes half a ladle more. For the boy, he says, and Mother Salt says the figure out loud, so the beach hears the figure. 3 of them have repeated it to each other before his boat is off the shingle. So the first thing 151 people learn about me is that I arrived owing them water. I do not wait to be looked at. That afternoon, I dig a hole in the black sand high up the beach, where the sun has been sitting since it came up, and I cut the wet weed off the low rocks until my hands are green to the wrist, and pack the hole with it. Pugo watches every stage of it. He is 9, his left leg turns in at the knee, and he eats while he talks, which means he talks with his mouth full, which means he talks. What is that for? He says. I tell him to wait. He tells me he has waited. I tell him to wait longer. There is exactly 1 sheet of cloth on this island, not on somebody's back, and it came off a dead man the hour I landed. I stretch it over the hole, weight the edges with stones, lay 1 stone in the middle so the cloth sags, and set a cup under the sag. Then I sit down and do nothing at all, and doing nothing is the hardest work in any of it. And Pugo sits down on the hot sand with his knees up and does it beside me, and at 9, that is a considerable thing to manage. By the middle of the afternoon there is water in the cup. About 1/3 of it, no more, and it is warm, and it tastes of absolutely nothing. On this island, that makes it the best thing anybody has had in their mouth since the rain. I give it to Pugo because Pugo is the one who waited. He drinks it standing up in front of about 40 people, and then holds the cup upside down over his open mouth for a while in case. Black sand takes the sun harder than pale sand does. The weed cooks and lets go of what is in it. The cloth stops the water going anywhere, and the stone tells it where to fall. That is all of it. A dead man's cloak and a cup. Mother Salt is up the slope before the sand under the cloth has cooled, and she does the arithmetic out loud, and she does it fast. "A third of a cup," she says. 151 people, half a ladle each, say that back to me. I do not stand there telling her it is water for an island, because it is not. It is proof that I can read this beach, and the beach takes it as proof, and that is worth a good deal more to me than a full cup. She could have had this any year she liked, and so could the 4 generations before her, except that it wants a sheet of something water will not go through, and the hides go south, and there is nothing growing here to weave. Every scrap on this island is being worn by somebody. That evening, she comes up with 2 men and stands over my pit and tells me it belongs to the island now, which on this island means it belongs to her. That is fine, I say, and I mean it, because I would rather watch what she does next than win an argument about a hole. What she does next is reach for the cup. She misses it by the width of a thumb, and she has it on the second try, and the 2 men with her find something out on the water to look at while she does. Nobody on that slope says one word about it, and there are 9 of them standing there. That is how I find out that every person on this island has known for years and has agreed among themselves not to know it out loud. 151 people on a dead island, and the woman who holds the water cannot see the cup she is pouring it into. In the morning I ask the only question worth asking. "What burns here?" I say. "Driftwood," says a man at the racks, and then he thinks about it for a while and adds, "when there is any." There has not been any since before the rain. I walk the whole length of the beach anyway and find a plank the length of my arm and 2 black roots. And a man tells me the plank is spoken for and gives me the name of the man who spoke for it. So I go north to the birds. The cliff smells exactly as a cliff full of birds smells, and under the nests the ground has stopped being ground. It is packed and dark and dry, and it comes up in my hand in bricks. I put a piece of it in my mouth, which I do not recommend to anybody, and then I put a piece of it inside my shirt, which I do. On the way back I stop at the racks where the cut kelp dries for the cook fires. It goes stiff as board. You can knock on it with a knuckle and hear it answer, and it burns fast and filthy and is gone inside an hour. Halfway up the east slope, somebody has built a dome out of black brick. The top has fallen in, and there is a bird nesting in the mouth of it, and one look at the shoulder of the thing tells you it is not weather that put it there. It is a man with a plan. I sit down when I see it, and I stay sitting long enough that Hun comes over and asks whether I am unwell, then answers for me, then asks again. That night at the fires I say it where the whole beach can hear, because there is no point saying it quietly to people who have already priced me at half a ladle. What this island needs is a fire nobody on these islands has ever stood next to. Bram claps me on the shoulder hard enough to move my feet and tells the 4 men nearest him that he said the same thing about the weed years ago and that nobody here listens to anybody. 2 of them agree with him. The 3rd one was not listening. Then Hoon sits down beside me at the fire and explains the ash. He gets as far as the month it falls in, and then a bird goes across in front of him, and he starts again from the beginning. By the 2nd time through, I have it. It falls on all 7 islands for a month a year, and it is the reason nobody over 40 out here can see the far end of his own arm. Mother Salt lets him finish, which nobody else does, and then cuts everybody to a quarter ladle, and says the 2 numbers this island actually runs on. Rain in 19 days, she says. Ash in 11 months. Nobody argues about the rain, the ash gets no answer at all, and the quiet after the 2nd number is not the same quiet as the one after the 1st. Hun says, to nobody in particular, that the gray sails have always come in the ash. 4 men start talking about the racks straight over the top of him, and he nods along until he has agreed with them instead. On Tharn, in a house with no man's ration in it, Ness takes the sealed jar down off the shelf and holds it and puts it back without opening it. Their mother sits with her back to the door. Vel comes in wet to the waist, stands in the middle of the floor, and does not sit down. Nobody eats. Back on the Black Beach, I tell them what is going to happen. I am going to pull fire out of this island, I say. Hotter than anything anybody here has stood next to. Hot enough to make the sand run. Bram claps. 2 men look at the cistern instead of at me, and that is the correct thing to be looking at. Everybody else goes to sleep because they are on a quarter ladle now, and they have heard men promise things before, and a promise has never once filled a cup. Pugo does not go. He sits down next to me on the cold sand with the empty cup still in his fist and asks me how hot is hot, and I tell him the number, and he stops chewing. The first thing I have to do is ruin a fire, and there is no quiet way to do that on an island where fuel is the only thing anybody owns. I cut kelp for 2 days with everybody else, and then I do not put mine on the racks. I dig a second hole further up the beach, pack it with the weeds still green, lay a fire in the belly of it, and let the fire take properly. Then, when it is going, when it is the best fire this beach has had in a month, I put the sand back over it. Steen and a man whose name I still do not have come up the slope at a run with a plank between them and start digging it open, and they are not being stupid. There is good fire under there, and they are on a quarter ladle, and the evening is cold. I stand in front of it with my arms out. That is my entire argument, and it is not a strong one, and I am aware while I am doing it that I have been on this beach a week and have contributed 1 hole. You are burning it, says Steen. I am not burning it, I say. I am cooking it. He asks me what it turns into, and I tell him something better, and I hear exactly how that sounds coming out of my mouth. So does everybody standing on the slope. A soft boy who cannot hold his breath for 30 seconds is telling grown men to let good fire go to waste, and they let him. I do not think it is because they believe me. I think it is because nothing else is happening that evening. It smokes for a day and a night. Hoon stands near it for most of that and tells me twice that a fire needs air. He is right, and it is the reason I have taken its air away. In the morning I lift the top off with a flat stone and pull the first of them out, and they come up black and light and dry, and 2 of them knocked together ring a little. Kelp burned without air stops being kelp. What is left behind is the heat, and it comes out slow and it comes out long, and it does not die in an hour as the stuff on the racks dies. That night I lay a fire of it under a stone with a hollow in the top and boil water in the hollow. This island has always been able to do that and has never once been able to afford it. Warm water goes round in the dark, half a cup at a time, and people hold it a while before they drink it. Nobody says very much. A woman who has not spoken to me since I landed puts both hands round hers and keeps them there long after it is empty. 2 of the old men start laughing at nothing at all, at each other, at the fire, at the sea. Pugo burns his mouth and tells everybody about it and then goes back for more and burns it again in the same place. And Mother Salt stands at the edge of the light with her ladle and watches the cups going round and has to make up a word on the spot for what is in them, because there has never been a word on this beach for water that is warm on purpose. She calls it the hot ration. It is not much of a name, and by morning it is the only one anybody uses, and I have learned something about who names things here. In the morning, I say the price out loud, because everything on this island has a price said out loud, and I would rather be the man saying it than hear it said about me. 1 load of coal is 1 man's back for 1 day at the racks. Cutting, carrying, packing, covering. 1 day, 1 load. Bram volunteers for 2. Loudly, at the racks, with his hand up like a man at a vote. He delivers one. Nobody remarks on it, and he spends the rest of the day being a man who volunteered for 2. Hun does 4 and tells nobody. Then, at the fire, he tells 1 man about it, and the man is mending net, and answers him about the net, and Hun agrees with him about the net, and they leave it there. The kelp coal is good. It is not good enough, and I know that before the first pit is cold, because I have already had my hand in something better, and it is lying under every nest at the north end of this island. The peat comes up in bricks, and it is dry the whole way through, and it burns like something that has been waiting to. 2 of those under a charge of kelp coal, and I have heat nobody on these islands has ever stood next to. And it is under the birds. It is what 4 generations of birds have left behind them, and it is why the nests are up there at all, and you cannot cut it out from under them and still have them. Mother Salt does the arithmetic before I finish asking. Eggs, she says. That cliff is eggs. I tell her it is a few days of digging, and the birds come back. She asks me when. Next season, I say, and she asks me what this island is supposed to eat between this season and next season, and she is not asking it to trap me. She is asking because she has answered that question herself every morning for 20 years. So I say my piece about heat. She lets me get all the way to the end of it, which is worse than being cut off, and then she gives the ruling standing where the beach can hear her, and the ruling is no. She is not being small, and she is not guarding the cistern. She has fed this island on eggs and half a ladle since before I was born into either of my lives, and I have been here 9 days with a cup. 2 men look at me to see whether I am going to go round her. There is a way to go round her. It runs along the far end of the cliff, where the ridge hides a lamp, and I know how it would go, and I know what it would cost on a beach where every person sleeps inside shouting distance of every other person. So the next morning I go back up to her and ask for less. I am not practiced at it, and she hears that in my voice before I get anywhere near a number. 12 days of the cliff, I say, and not all of it. The south end, under the old nests, and I put 4 loads a day on the cook fires while we dig, and they are your loads and you hand them out. She asks who cuts the kelp for those 4 loads. We do, I say. On top of the digging, she says. On top of the digging. She thinks about it where the beach can watch her do it. That is a decision in itself. And then she names her terms, and they are harder than I came up that slope expecting. 6 days, not 12. 6 loads a day, not 4. The north end of the cliff stays shut all season. The day I miss a delivery, the cliff shuts with it, and every one of the 6 comes to her hands, not to my fire. I take it. I take it out loud, and I take it quickly, because the beach is standing right there, and there is only one way to lose a thing like this twice. The island watches her beat me, and it does them good. She goes back up to the cistern with the ladle, and I go north with a dozen men and a pile of flat stones, and I do the arithmetic on the way, and it is thin. It is thin, and it will have to do. 6 days at the south end takes the skin off 8 pairs of hands, and gives me more fuel than this beach has held at one time since anybody can remember. On the last afternoon, a bird takes a strip out of the back of Sten's arm, and he is proud of it for a week. Tog comes in 4 days after that, with 3 off Kel and Osso, takes his ladles off the top, and tells me the island feeds itself. He says it this time to a man walking past with a brick of peat under each arm, which spoils it, and he does not notice. 154, says Mother Salt the next morning. She says the count every morning whether anybody is listening or not, and that is the first time since I landed that I hear it go up. 2 of the 3 go straight down to the water, because everybody arrives hungry and the water is where the food is. The 3rd one comes up the east slope instead. She is 17. Her name is Ide, and Kel put her on a boat because she falls down sometimes and gets up again, and Kel decided that was more than they could carry. She walks past me without stopping and puts her hand flat on the black brick of the old dome. What is it for? She says. 2 weeks I have been on this island, and that is the first question anybody has asked me worth answering. I tell her I do not know yet. She stands there a moment longer and then asks me what it was for, which is a different question and a much better one. We dig it out over 3 evenings, with our hands and a plank, because the inside is packed hard with sand and full of the brick that came down when the top went. And it is not a ruin. It is a design. There is a throat cut low on the seaward side where the wind comes across, and the brick is laid in 2 skins with sand packed between them, and whoever built this knew that a dome holds heat, and a box gives it away. ID finds his stone on the 3rd evening, down in the sand at the back. It is a flat river stone with a hollow ground into one face, the same as the one I picked up off the shingle my 2nd day here, and she holds it up, and neither of us says anything for a while. Somebody stood on this beach before me. He built the best thing on this island out of the worst brick anybody ever laid, and he got the shape right, and the throat right, and the skins right, and then he died, and I can tell you exactly what killed him. You cannot get sand to run on driftwood. There was no driftwood then either. He had everything he needed except the one thing that burns, and he sat up here with his stone and he waited for it. And it never came ashore. ID asks whether I have anything to burn. I take a brick of coal out of my shirt and put it in her hand and watch her weigh it and turn it and knock a knuckle against it, and she has it before I open my mouth. That is what the 6 days were for, she says. And then she says the thing I have not said out loud to anybody. 6 days of cliff is nowhere near enough. We charge it 8 nights later. Every load this island has, 2 days of everybody's cooking, going into a dome halfway up a slope on the word of a boy who could not last 30 seconds in that water. Mother Salt comes up to watch it go in. She does not say anything about the arithmetic. She said it once already, and she is not a woman who says a thing twice, and she stands there holding the ladle until the throat is lit and the draft takes it. It burns all night. It burns better than anything I have had under my hands in 20 years, and I sit up with it and feed it and watch the mouth of it go from red into a color I have not seen since the coast. Pugo falls asleep against my leg somewhere in the middle of it, and I leave him there, because the sand up here is warm for the first time since I landed, and it will not be warm tomorrow. And in the morning the sand in it has not moved. It is hot. It is gray and hot, and it has sagged about the width of a fingernail where it touched the wall, and it is sand, and it is going to be sand this evening as well. ID asks what happens now, and she asks it in front of Mother Salt, and everybody who gave up 2 days of cooking to put that charge in the dome. I tell them the truth. The fire is hot, and the fire is not hot enough. And then Mother Salt asks the question I have been dreading since the first brick came out of the sand. How much more? The answer is air, and I do not arrive at it cleverly. I arrive at it standing in the mouth of the dome at first light with my face in the last of the heat, feeling for the places where the heat is not. A fire eats air. Take the air off it and it smolders, and smoldering is what I want in a covered pit and the last thing I want in a kiln. This dome breathes whatever the wind hands it, and the wind here comes off the water in the evening and lies down at midnight. And midnight is where I lost. Heidi says it before I do, from a plank she is sitting on, and she slept through the entire night in question. It stopped when the wind stopped, she says. Ask the boy who was feeding it. So we cut a throat. We take out the low brick on the seaward side and open a channel under the floor, packed round with stone, coming up through the grate, so that the fire drinks from below instead of from whatever the evening feels like giving it. And we make bellows out of 2 hides that were somebody's bedding the day before, and the frame of the plank the men brought up to dig my char pit open. 2 boys work them in shifts, and there is no shift shorter than 400. Heidi counts the strokes out loud, because she counts everything out loud, and by the second day she can hold 400 without losing the rhythm, and I cannot, and she does not mention it, which is worse than if she did. Pugo takes 1 shift and gets to 206, and then lies flat on his back in the sand, and explains to anybody passing that 206 is a much higher number than it sounds. 4 more loads for the second charge. Mother Salt says that figure out loud at the morning count, in the same voice she uses for the heads, one after the other, so that they arrive in everybody's ear as the same kind of number. 154, she says. 4 loads. And then she says what 4 loads buy if they go under the cook pots instead. Boiled water for everybody for 3 days, and she says it while she is looking at a woman whose youngest has been coughing since before I landed. The woman says nothing to me. She looks at me the whole time Mother Salt is talking and then goes back to what she was doing, and I take the 4 loads, and I carry 2 of them up the slope myself. Nobody stops me, and nobody helps me carry them either, and those 2 facts together are the entire opinion of this island. We light at noon so the boys are fresh, the throat takes and the dome starts to talk, a low, steady pull that I have not heard since the coast, the sound of a room breathing in through its teeth and never quite breathing out. By dark, the inside of it is a color nobody here has a word for. By the middle of the night, the sand in the pot has stopped being sand and started being something that moves when the pot moves. It runs. It runs slowly and badly and full of things that have no business being in it, and it runs. In the morning, I break the pot and take out a lump the size of my fist. It is green, the green of the water over the rocks at the south end. It has so many bubbles through it that you can see them from across the beach when the light is behind it, and one whole face of it has picked up a seam of ash. I carry it down the slope with both hands, as you carry a thing that is worth something, and by the time I reach the bottom half, the island is standing there, because word got down ahead of me. What is it for? Says Pugo, with his mouth full, which is how I know he ran the whole way instead of finishing. Nothing, I say. Nothing yet. I say it in front of every person who has just spent 2 days of their own cooking on it, and then I put it down on the sand, where every one of them can look at it. Somebody laughs. It is not a cruel laugh, which is somehow worse. Mother Salt neither laughs nor says a word, and she turns and goes back up to the cistern, and that is her entire comment, and the whole beach hears it. Bram picks the lump up and holds it against the sun and tells 9 people it will be worth something soon. By the evening he has settled what it is for. It is for trade. It is for the elders. The elders on Kel will want them, and he has heard that Kel wants them. Nobody on Kel has heard of it? Bram is not lying. Bram has simply got to the future slightly ahead of the facts, and he is comfortable there, and so far, it is not costing anybody anything. Hun tries to say something about the draft. He says the wind dropped again at the same hour, and that the boys were slow after the 3rd shift, and that the color in the mouth changed when they slowed. All 3 of those are true, and the 3rd one is the one worth having. 4 men start talking about the racks over the top of him before he gets to the end of it, and he stops and lets them have it. The rain comes 4 nights later, on the day Mother Salt said it would, because she has been naming the day for 20 years and has never been wrong by more than one. The cistern fills in about 2 hours. People stand out in it with their arms away from their sides. Pugo runs up and down the beach with his mouth open until she tells him he looks like a bird, and then he keeps doing it, because now it is a performance. In the morning, the ration goes back to a full ladle, and she says the count and the ration in the same breath, and for a day and a half, this is the best place I have ever lived in either of the lives I have had. Then the arithmetic changes shape under everybody. Water was the thing that was short. Water is not short now, and what is left over is fuel, and fuel is the one thing on this island anybody is actually frightened of. She takes the kiln's coal to nothing for a week. She does it in the open at the morning count, standing up on the rock holding the ladle, and she does it correctly. 6 loads a day went north for 6 days, she says, and the north end is shut all season, and what came off that cliff has to boil water for this island until the racks catch up, so the dome gets nothing until they do. I do not argue it. I say that is fair where the beach can hear me say it, and in the morning I go down to the racks with a knife like the rest of them and cut kelp for a week, and I am worse at it than a 9-year-old. Bram tells me twice a day that this is temporary. Hun tells me nothing at all, and I notice it and do not think about it. On the 4th night, I am sitting up the slope in the dark with nothing in my hands for the first time in 3 weeks, and I stop looking at the dome and look down at the fire instead. I look past the fire at the people round it, and at where each of them has chosen to sit, and how long it took them to choose it, and which of them arrived while there was still light to choose by. There is a man on the near side who always sits on the near side. There is a woman who answers a wave a beat late, every single time, and who has never once waved first. There is a man who has not mended net since I landed, and who used to, because his needle is still stuck in the thatch over where he sleeps. There is a man who lets his own son pour for him and makes a joke of it. There are 2 who will not walk down the shingle after dark, and they have 4 different reasons between them. There is a woman who finds the cup with the back of her hand before she closes her fingers on it. So I start counting. I count them the way I count loads, out loud and slowly, and I get to 31 before I run out of people I am sure about. ID is sitting behind me with her stones, and she has been listening to all of it. Say the number again, Kier, she says. I say it. She says it back to me wrong, on purpose, quietly, so that I have to say it a 3rd time, and then she stops grinding. 31 out of 154. On the whole of Tharn, there are 19 men who decide everything that happens on these islands. Who eats, who gets a boat, who gets rowed out here. There are more people going blind round this fire than there are men on Tharn with a hand to raise. I've been staring at a lump of green glass for 3 weeks. The thing I should have been looking at has been sitting round that fire the entire time, holding cups in 2 hands and finding rims with a thumb, and I have walked past it every night on my way up the slope to go and be clever. ID asks what I am going to do about it. Nothing, I tell her, because there is nothing, because a lump of green glass with 100 bubbles through it is not an eye, and I have no fuel to make a second one, and no promise of any. Then I go and find the flat river stone off the shingle, and start grinding on it that same night, and it is not a decision, it is what my hands do when I have run out of ways to sit still. It takes 4 nights. Wet sand under the stone and the lump on top of it, round and round, and it comes off a hair at a time, and there has never been a shortcut in this trade, and there is not going to be one on a beach. Twice I go too far on one side and have to start the side again. By the fourth night, I have 2 discs about 2 thumbs across, thicker in the middle than at the rim, and they are ugly and they are green, and when I hold one out at arm's length, the world through it is a poor copy of itself, with a bright line round every edge. Which means it works badly, and badly is what working looks like the first time at anything. I have made better in my sleep on a bench with proper stones and a proper wheel, and I have never in my life made one that mattered this much. ID catches me holding one out at arm's length on the 5th morning. She does not ask what it is. She watches me do it twice, then moves her own head sideways as mine moved, and then she looks out at the water for a while. "You are not making a thing to look at," she says. "You are making a thing to look through." And she says it the way she says numbers, without lifting her voice at the end of it, so that it lands as a finding and not as a guess. I tell her it is for the fire, for reading the color in the mouth of the dome without cooking my eyes. That is a real thing I have really done in a real workshop, and it is also a lie, and she has been sitting behind me for 4 nights while I ground it. She says all right. She says it in the voice people use when they have just decided something about you, and you are not going to enjoy finding out what. I want the first time to happen in front of everybody. That is the reason, and it is not a good one, and I do not turn it over, because there is a piece of leather in my shirt that came off a dead man's boot, and it is the only piece on this island that nobody is standing in. I boil pitch in a shell on the rack's fire, and cut the leather wet, and bed the discs into it while it is still giving, and I press the seal down with both thumbs until the pitch goes hard, and my thumbs are black for 2 days after. On the slope above the kiln, after everybody is asleep, Ide sits with her back against the warm stone of the dome and grinds. She counts out loud, low, 1 up to 400, and when the ash in the wind catches her throat and she coughs, she stops and starts again at 1. A boot is a small piece of leather, and it will only pull a seal on a small face. I have 2 discs, a strap, and a mask that will fit nobody on this island over the age of about 10. And the only person on this beach who will put his face down into that water and keep it there is 9 years old, and I have never once had to ask him for anything. I do not call anybody down. It is the one thing I get right about that morning, and I only get it right because I am afraid of what happens to a man who fails twice in front of the same beach. There are 4 people on the sand when we do it. ID, because she ground half of it. Pugo, because it is his face. A woman called Des, who is mending a line and does not stop mending it. And 1 man who is there because the upturned boat is the only shade at that hour. 3 rules, I tell him. You go down on the rope. You come up the moment I pull twice. You do not go anywhere I cannot haul you back from. He repeats 2 of them round a mouthful. I make him say the 3rd one on its own, and he says it, and he gets every word right, and I can hear him not meaning it. The mask is 2 green discs, the width of 2 thumbs, set into boot leather that was soaked and shaped on his own face and sealed round the rim with pitch. It is ugly. It smells of a dead man's foot and hot tar, and it is the most expensive object on this island. Bram comes down the beach at the last moment because Bram always knows, and asks to go first, and it will not go on him. It sits up on the bone under his eyes and gaps at the cheek, and he tells everybody it is a poor fit rather than a small mask. Pugo wades out to his waist, washes the inside of it, puts it on, pulls the strap, stands there breathing for a while with his hands on the rope, and goes under. Marek is not here, so I count. I count out loud on the rope at the same speed he counts on the rail, and I hear exactly what it sounds like coming out of my own mouth. 20, 30. At 40, Ide stands up. At 45, I have the rope in both hands, and I have not pulled it, because a rope pulled twice on a boy who is fine is a rope you do not get to pull again. He comes up somewhere past 50, and he comes up on his own, white round the mouth, and he holds the gunwale of the beached boat with both hands, and there is nothing in either of them. It is bright down there, he says, and then he says nothing else for as long as it takes I to walk down the beach and back, and Des has stopped mending her line. He stayed down because he could see. For the whole of his life the water has been brown at arm's reach with nothing in it to look at, and this morning there was, and a boy who is looking at something forgets that he is also a boy who is breathing. And his hands are empty because of what is lying on the bottom out there, and he tells it to us in the order a 9-year-old tells things, the worst possible order and also the fastest. They are people, he says, lying in a line going out and down, not scattered, as things go over the side of a boat that has not stopped moving, and some of them still have the rope on. Des puts her line down. The man in the shade gets up. Nobody on that sand says the word for a while, and the one who says it is 9, because nobody has taught him yet which words you are supposed to walk around. Mother Salt is halfway down the slope by then, ladle and all, and she does not look surprised, and that goes round this island faster than the bones do. You knew, says Ide. I have known since I was smaller than he is, says Mother Salt. Then why does nobody say it? Because saying it does not move it, she says. And then she says the rest of it standing on the shingle in front of the island, because Ide has opened a door, and she has decided to walk the whole way through it and take the island with her. This island is here so that 6 islands have somewhere to put the people they can afford to lose. That is what it is for, and that is what it has been for, since before her mother poured out of that cistern. And the gray sails come in the ash, when no man on any of these islands can see a hull at 200 paces, and they have come every generation, and they are coming again. Somebody at the back says 11 months. She corrects him without turning round. 10, she says. It has been 5 weeks since that boy came off Tog's boat. Bram says we should all learn to swim. 4 people tell him at once that everybody here can swim. He says he means properly. That night nobody goes down to the south end of the beach. 2 men sit up on the rocks looking out at black water in the dark, a thing that cannot be done, and they do it anyway until the cold moves them. Ide takes the mask apart on her knees at the fire, not to change anything, only to see how the pitch has taken against the leather, and while she is doing it, she asks me what a furnace is. I tell her, a room with no window in it, every day but one, a fire you feed and never once let go out, and a bench along the wall where a man works from dark to dark. She asks how many people. 4, I say. Then she asks how many people came in to look. Nobody, I say. Nobody comes in to look at a furnace. You carry the work out of the room and somebody else's name goes on the front of it and you go back in and feed the fire. She turns that over for a while and then says it explains a good deal about me and goes back to the pitch. And I sit there for the rest of the evening working out which good deal she means. Tog comes in that afternoon with nothing aboard and takes his ladles anyway. He carries a message for 1 ladle and he tells you what he saw for nothing, because talking is free and he does it whether you want it or not. Vel is going down at the breath twice a day now instead of once, he says, and there is a house on Tharn that eats when he does. Their mother has been ill since the rain. And Marek counted for a boy off Sab last week, and the boy did not come up, and Marek went to 60 before they took the rope off him. I do not send anything back. I have nothing to send, and I would have to say it through Tog, and Tog would price it, and I would rather owe my brother than owe the ferryman. That is what I decide, standing on a beach with a lump of green glass in my shirt. It takes me about 4 heartbeats, and it is the cheapest decision I make all month. By the afternoon, 3 people have come to me about the mask, separately, all of them wanting the same thing, and none of them asking for it the same way. The third is a man of about 50 whose brother went off a beach on Osso in an ash month 20 years ago. He does not ask to borrow it. He asks what it costs, and then offers 4 days at the racks and his own ration for 2 of them. Mother Salt stops it in the open before the sun is down. Nobody goes down there looking for anybody, she says. Not this month and not next month. A man who finds his brother down there stops working, and a man who does not find him goes again tomorrow, and there is 1 mask. She is right again. She was right about the eggs, and right about the terms, and right about this, and I am starting to find the regularity of it wearing, which says a good deal more about me than about her. He goes out at dusk anyway, from the rocks at the south point, alone, without the rope, and nobody sees him leave because the whole island is at the fires arguing about a thing that happened this morning. He comes back after dark. He walks up the beach and sets the mask down on the sand in front of the fires and stands there with empty hands and does not answer anybody who speaks to him, and then he goes and sits down at the edge of the light on his own. Whatever he found out there, he never says, and I never ask him. What I do instead is take the rules that have been sitting in my head and say them aloud in front of the fires, so that they stop being mine and start being the island's. Who goes down is settled the night before and never on the morning. Nobody goes deeper than the rope is long. Nobody goes alone. I say the third one twice. Once at the man sitting on his own outside the firelight, and once at the boy holding the mask, and the boy nods at me with his mouth full, and I hear him not meaning that one either. Then I put my hand out for the mask, and Pugo does not give it to me. It is mine, he says. I made it, I say. It was made on my face, he says, which is a better argument than mine, and he has clearly been walking round with it all evening waiting for the chance. So it stays with him. He sleeps with it under his arm that night and every night after it, and nobody else on this island ever puts it on. Then I go up the slope in the dark and stand in front of the kiln and look at it for a long while, and I am angry with it. That is stupid. It is a dome and it has never done anything to anybody. Water is not the problem on these islands, and fuel is only the price. The problem is that every person who decides anything out here goes blind somewhere between 40 and 60, and has agreed with every other person not to mention it. And I have spent 5 weeks making a lump and then a mask for one boy's face, so that one boy could go down and look at 4 generations of drowned people. I have the only pair of hands on this sea that can do anything about any of it, and I have been making toys. ID comes up with her stones and sits down against the warm brick and does not ask what is wrong, which is why I tell her. I need faces, I say. Not one face, but every face on this beach, and I need to know what each of them cannot see and at what distance, before I spend one more load on anything at all. She asks how many days that takes. 2, I say. 4, she says. She is right, and I say 2 again anyway, and she goes back to her grinding without arguing about it, which is her way of leaving a thing standing where I can trip over it later. It is too dark to grind by then, so I go down and ask Mother Salt for the lamp. She brings it up herself, which she does not have to do, and I ask her to hold it over the stone while I grind, because a lamp standing on sand throws its light exactly where the light is no use to anybody. She holds it in the wrong place. I move my hands into it. She holds it in the wrong place again, and I move again, and neither of us says one word about it. The third time I take her wrist, not hard, and put the lamp where I need it, and she lets me. She does not pull back, and she does not explain, and she does not go. We work like that until the middle of the night. I grind and she holds, and she is looking at the place where she believes my hands are, and every so often she asks how it is coming along, which is the question you ask when you cannot see it for yourself. When she leaves, she puts her hand out for the ladle she set down on the flat stone, and she puts it down a hand's width away from it, and I let her find it herself, because I have nothing to give her yet, and I am not going to make her thank me for pity. The first thing the mask earns is not wonder. It is salvage, and it takes Pugo about 3 days to work that out on his own, which is 2 days faster than it takes me. 4 generations of boats have gone over the top of this island's bottom and thrown away everything they could not sell. Rope, anchors of stone with the holes still in them, a copper pot, and out past the third rock lying on its side under a hand of sand, a hull. Pugo brings the count up the beach every evening as other people bring fish. 2 lengths of rope today, he says with his mouth full, 3 yesterday, a pot, and a boat, and it is a whole boat, and it is on its side, and it is not that far. Hun says it will come up easier at the top of the tide. He says it twice, to two different men, on two different mornings, and both times somebody is already talking about the rope. We raise it at the top of the tide. Nobody says whose idea that was, and Hun does not say either, and he works the rope with the rest of them, and afterwards he tells a man about it, and the man is eating. It comes up over 4 hours with skins lashed under the gunnels and 14 people on 2 lines. When the sand lets go, it happens all at once. The hull swings sideways and the water goes brown, and Des shouts something at it that I am not going to repeat. Then the bow is up, and there are 154 people standing on a black beach watching a boat arrive from underneath. It is small, and it is nothing. It is a beach boat with a split strake and no mast step, and it would not live one night in open water. It is also the first thing this island has ever owned that floats. We price it out loud on the sand, because everything here gets priced out loud. 1 ladle to carry a message, half a ladle to carry a boy, and now nothing, says Pugo, and he says it to the water and not to anybody in particular, and about 40 people hear him say it. There is a copper pot in the salvage as well, dented and gone green, about the size of a washing bowl, and Mother Salt carries it up to the fires herself, and does not let anybody take a side of it. We boil in it that night. Weed and the small crabs off the low rocks, and 2 handfuls of the eggs she has been holding back since the north end shut. All of it in the one pot for everybody, half a cup each, and the soft stuff off the bottom to whoever is nearest. Pugo gets 2 goes because Pugo found the pot. He announces this before he takes the second one, at length, with the full count of everything his crew has brought up, in order, and nobody stops him. Tog is on the beach when we bring it up, because Tog is on the beach every 3rd day. He walks the length of it, looks at the split strake, and tells us it will not live one night in open water. He is right. Then he says, the island feeds itself. Nobody hears him this time, because every person on that sand is standing in the water round the boat, and he says it again louder, to exactly the same result. Then I start on faces, and Ide was right and I was wrong. It takes 4 days, and by the second of them, I have stopped counting how many people find a reason to walk past that plank. Eyes do not fail the same way twice. Some go long, so a man picks a sail out at half a mile and cannot find the knot in his own hands. Some go short, so a woman mends line all day and cannot tell her son from her nephew across a fire. Some go in one eye and not the other, so a man walks into things on his left and has a separate explanation ready for each of them. And some go the milky kind, the kind that comes up slowly behind the eye like weather, and for that one, I have nothing at all. I have to say so to 2 people in 4 days. The second one asks me twice to be sure I meant it. I scratch a line on a plank and set it up on the shingle and move people back from it 4 steps at a time, and Ide holds the plank and says the results out loud after each of them, so that both of us are carrying it, because there is nothing on this island to write on and nothing to write with. Halfway through the second day, I grind a thick one, no wider than a thumbnail and fat through the middle, a drop rather than a disc, and I take a fishbone splinter out of the flat of Des's hand with it while 4 people watch. She looks at her own palm through it afterwards and goes very quiet, and then she asks whether it does that to everything, and I say yes, and she says the thing she says. She has not been able to see her own hands properly since her husband died, and had assumed that the 2 were connected. Des is 60. Des has mended every line on this island for as long as anybody here has been on it. Des goes short, which means she needs exactly the pair I know how to make with the glass I have, and she is the correct answer, and I do not give them to her. What I do instead is give them to Bram. Bram goes long. Bram cannot tell one boat from another at 400 paces, and he has been guessing for years and covering it with volume. Bram is also the loudest man on this beach, and he stands where people can see him, and whatever happens to Bram is known by everybody on the island inside an hour. That is the reason. I can dress it in 3 others, and I have all 3 ready, and if you put me in front of a fire and ask me, I would give you the one about him being the man the island listens to. The truth is that I want it seen, and he is the fastest way to have it seen. I test him at arm's length because it is the end of a long day and he is standing right there. I hold up 2 fingers and ask him what he has. He tells me what I want to hear, quickly, the way a man answers when he is frightened of the answer, and I take it because I am not looking for a problem. I am looking for a face. ID asks me one question about it that evening. She asks why Bram. I tell her because everybody will hear about it, which is the true reason said in a way that sounds like a plan, and she looks at me for a moment too long and goes back to her stones. 4 loads go into that pair. 4 loads is 4 days of one man's back at the racks, and it is boiled water for this island for 3 days, and Mother Salt says both of those figures at the morning count, while the charge is still in the dome. I grind them for close work, because that is the pair I tested him for at arm's length at the end of a long day. I hand them over on the slope in front of the whole island, in daylight, with everybody called up off the racks for it. I could have done it at the fires in the evening with 9 people. I call them all up, and I let it take a while. The frame is boot leather again, and a strip of whalebone off the salvage, bound at the bridge, ugly as everything else I have made here. Bram puts them on and gets them straight. He turns round to face the water, and then he lies. Bram wants those to work more than I want them to work, and he wants it in front of every person he has ever talked at, so he names the boat coming in past the point. He names it Oso. It is not Oso, it is Tog, and it has been Tog for as long as it takes to say the word. Somebody says so. Bram laughs and says the light is behind it. Then he turns up the slope and names the man standing on the ridge, and he gets that wrong as well, and the man on the ridge shouts down his own name to help him, which is the kindest thing anybody does all afternoon, and which finishes it. The island laughs, and the island keeps laughing, and it goes on considerably longer than a thing like that should. Bram stands there in his new glass with his shoulders back, taking it, doing the face of a man who is in on it. And while he is still standing there, somebody at the back says 4 loads out loud, and nobody answers him. Nobody has to. I do not repair it. That is the thing I could have done and did not do. I could have said the true and useful sentence. These are the wrong pair for him, and I will grind him a right pair. Instead, I say the flat one. His eyes go long, I say. These are for close work. My mistake. And I say it in front of him, and I say it to the beach and not to him, which turns a man's face into a lesson about my method. Bram says, of course, and says he knew that, and says it twice. Then he pushes them back up his nose and goes down to the racks in them. He wears them all afternoon. He wears them down to the racks and up to the fires, and he is still wearing them when he lies down, and he has them on again before he eats in the morning, and he does not take them off after that. Des is next, I say, out loud, where the beach can hear me fixing it. She tells me she can wait. Then she asks whether the pair after that could go to a woman on Vantry she has not seen in 9 years, and I tell her that is not how any of this works yet. And she says, all right, and she waits. 2 people stop speaking to me over that pair. One of them tests worse than Bram at every distance I have, and stood at the racks through the whole afternoon without once coming up the slope. The other one is his wife, and she is the one who comes and tells me. 4 loads went into a pair of spectacles for a man who cannot use them. There is nothing wrong with the grinding. Nobody on this island has said the word wrong to me about any of it, and nobody is going to. And that turns out to be worse than being told. At the water's edge, alone, after dark, Bram takes the spectacles off and holds them out at the length of his arm, and looks through them at the water. Then he brings them in to the middle. Then he holds them almost against his eye. Then he puts them back on, straightens them with both hands, and walks up the beach to where the fires and the people are. In the morning, I find Ide at the stones and tell her we are going to do it properly from now on, and that nobody gets a pair until I have had them at 4 distances on 2 days. She says that is what she told me. I say I know. She says she is going to say it once more, later, when I have forgotten again, and she is not joking, and she goes back to counting. Then I go and look for Mother Salt, because the next pair is hers, and I have known it for 9 days, and I have not asked her, and I am not sure why. I find her at the cistern with the lid off, and she is not pouring. She is standing with her hand flat on the rim of it, and her head turned slightly to one side, listening to the sound the water makes when she moves the ladle, judging the level of it by ear as you judge a jar. She hears me on the shingle and has the ladle in the water before I am within 10 paces, and she says the count, 154, and asks me what I want, and there is a thing in her voice I have not heard from her yet, and the thing is fright. Down at the water, Bram is talking to Tog, and I am not near enough to hear it, and I do not go over. Bram has news worth a crossing, he says, and Tog names his price, a ladle, and Bram pays it. 2 days, 4 distances, each eye on its own, and every result said out loud twice so that 2 people are carrying it. That is Ide's method, and she is not gracious about having it adopted. 14 faces come to the plank on the first morning. I had 31 on my count at the fire, and I am 9 short of it by the end of the second day, because 6 of the 31 will not come and stand at a plank while there are people behind them. So we move it up behind the dome where the slope hides it, and 4 of the 6 come that afternoon, 1 at a time, and not one of them meets anybody coming down. A man of 60 asks me whether it hurts. I tell him I am going to hold up fingers. He says he knows that, and then asks again whether it hurts. 9 long, 3 short, 2 the milky kind. The answer I have nothing for and have to give twice in 2 days. And one man who has been walking into things on his left for 4 years and has an explanation ready for every single one and gives me 3 of them before he will let me look at him. Mother Salt does not come to the plank. She does not refuse to come. She simply has something at the cistern on both days, and on the second day she has it at the exact hour I walk up there. So I take the plank to her. I carry it up and stand it against the rock and tell her I would like 4 distances, and that the whole of it takes about as long as a pot takes to boil. No, she says. There are 2 men filling for the racks standing 4 paces away, and she says it in front of them, flat, in the voice she uses for a ruling. I wait until the 2 men have gone, which is a mistake because once they have gone, she says it again and she says it harder. I do not need it, she says. I tell her I have counted her steps between the rock and the lid and that she takes the same number every time and takes them fast and takes them slowly when the lid is already off. She asks me whether I am proud of that. Then she says the rest of it. And she says it quietly, and it is the only time on this island I ever hear her drop her voice to keep a thing inside a conversation. Every person on this beach has stayed alive because I know what is in that rock to the finger, she says. What am I? The morning they find out, I am guessing at it. I tell her nobody will know. She tells me the whole beach will know inside a day of me putting a thing on her face, and she has that exactly right, and I have no way round it, because the entire point of what I make is that it can be seen being used. So I push. I tell her what a pair costs in loads, 4 of them, and I say the figure out loud so that it sounds generous. That is the wrong shape to carry to a woman who has been rationing for 20 years, because now it is a debt, and a debt is a thing she is allowed to refuse. She refuses it. I go back down the slope with the plank under my arm, and Heidi does not ask me how it went, which is how I know she watched all of it from the stones. The day's water gets drawn at first light into the big jar so that the lid can stay shut through the heat, and it has been done that way on this island since before anybody standing on it was born. The big jar cracked at some point, in the night or a week ago, and it is a hair of a crack running from the shoulder down to the belly on the side that faces the rock. She pours the day's water into it at dawn, by weight and by sound and by the length of her own arm, as she has poured everything since her eyes went. She gets the measure exactly right. All of it is in the sand before the sun is over the ridge. ID is the one who says it, and she does not say it to wound anybody. She says it the way she says the result of a distance test, out loud, once, where people are standing. The jar is cracked, she says. It has been cracked a while. She could not see it. Hun says, into the middle of that he mentioned that jar to a man about a month back, and nobody asks him which man. 2 people tell him it hardly matters now, and he agrees with them, and sits down. Mother Salt does not defend herself and does not explain anything. She lifts the ladle off the rock and puts it through her belt and stands there while the beach works out for itself how long this has been going on. She comes up the slope to me at noon and does not sit down. Put them on me, Kier, she says. Down there where they can all see it. because I am not doing it up here and then walking down through them afterwards. So we do it on the black sand at the bottom of the slope with the whole island standing round, and Idy holds the frame while I bend the bone at the bridge, and it takes longer than it should, because her hands are steady and mine are not. She puts them on herself. She will not have me do the last of it. She gets them straight at the first try, and then she stands there with her eyes shut long enough that somebody at the back starts to say something and is told to be quiet. Then she opens them and looks at the sea. She turns round slowly, the whole way round, as a person turns in a room they have not stood in for years, and she takes the beach with her face, and at the far end of it, she stops and says Pugo's name. He is 90 paces off with the mask in one hand and his mouth full and no idea that anybody is looking at him. She gets him right. Then she gets Des and the man who mends net, and Sten, and then Sten's boy, and she starts the boy's name and stops in the middle of it. Because the last time she looked at that child, he was small enough to be carried on a hip. And then she looks down into her own ladle, and that is what finishes the beach, more than the names did. A woman standing on black sand holding a wooden ladle up in front of her face, looking at the water in it for a long time, and saying nothing at all. Steen's boy asks his father what is wrong with her in the voice children use when they think somebody has been hurt. His father tells him to be quiet and does not answer the question because he cannot. Pugo walks up and stands in front of her and asks her what he looks like. She looks at him for a while and tells him he looks like a boy who talks with his mouth full. He is delighted with this and repeats it to 9 people before dark. 6 years. She says the number herself an hour later and nobody has to work it out. 6 years of pouring for this island by weight and by sound, getting it right every morning, and coming down the slope to say a count of faces she had not seen any of. She gives the cistern back before the sun is off the ridge. She goes up on the rock and says that the keeping of it belongs to the island, that anybody may draw and anybody may pour, and that she is not going to hold a thing she cannot see by frightening people about it. And the island hands it straight back to her inside the hour, without a vote and without anybody standing up to make anything of it. 4 men carry the lid up and set it down at her feet and go back to the racks, and Des puts the ladle into her hand and closes the fingers round, which is not the same thing at all, and every person on that beach knows it. She held it before because they were frightened of what happens if nobody does. She holds it now because they gave it to her, and she has to live inside that difference from this morning on. Bram tells 4 people he knew about her eyes years ago. 2 of them believe him. He is not even lying this time, which is what makes it hard to sit near. Tog comes in the next morning at his usual hour and finds 3 hulls already up on the beach ahead of him, drawn well above the tide line, with their gear out on the sand. 2 off Kel and 1 off Osso, and not one of them carrying anybody out here to be got rid of. They have come because of what they have heard, and the Osso boat has an old man in the bow who is handed out over the side by his own sons, 1 at each elbow. Tog's trade was never the boat. His trade was being the only man on this sea willing to put a hull on a beach that nobody wanted to reach. Everybody wants to reach it now, and they all have their own hulls, and none of them needs a price list read to them on the way over. He does not work it out all at once. He works it out across about 4 days, and you can stand on the beach and watch him doing. Then he finds me at the racks and stands about for a while and asks whether there is anything on this island that a man with a boat could be doing. He does not ask me for water, and he does not ask me for glass. He asks for a berth. It is the only thing that man has ever wanted, and I have been listening to his price list twice a week for 2 months without once hearing it in there. Mother Salt gives it to him. She puts him on the racks and puts his boat on the racks with him, and from that week he hauls cut kelp round from the south end for nothing and eats what everybody eats. He tells the joke again on the 3rd morning to 2 men who are now working beside him, the one about how the island feeds itself. It is worse than it was. It is going to go on getting worse. Nobody has told him, and nobody is going to. 158, she says the next morning, and she says it looking at them, which she has not done since before any of them can remember. By nightfall, there are 9 people sitting outside the mouth of the dome on the east slope, and every last one of them has a reason to be up there that is not about their eyes. One is returning a plank. One has come to look at the throat, which he has been meaning to do for weeks. One has brought me food I did not ask for, and will not take it back down the hill. Hun is up there, because Hun is generally up there. None of them says it. They sit on the warm stone and wait for me to work it out, and it takes me until the fourth one arrives to work it out, and then I let them all go on sitting there anyway, because I like the look of 9 people on my slope. I have coal for 2 pairs, 4 loads to a plate, and there are 8 loads in the racks once the cook fires have taken theirs, and I do that some 3 times on the way up, and it does not come out any differently on the third go. 9 faces, 2 pairs, and there is nobody on this sea to appeal to about it, because the only man alive who can decide which 2 is sitting on a black slope in the dark with a flat river stone in his hand. The 2 pairs go onto 2 faces, and I put both of them on with my own hands, in front of people, and from that morning, nothing out here works the way it worked before. By the second day, a man from the north end has offered me 2 loads of peat, which he does not have and intends to have, and which he means to dig at night out of the half of the cliff that is shut. A woman offers me her place at the racks. Her place at the racks is her food. I tell her no. She asks me whose place she ought to be offering it to instead, and she is not being clever with me. She wants a name. Hun offers nothing and asks for nothing. Hun comes up the slope, stands slightly too close to me for about as long as a pot takes to boil, tells me the throat is drawing better since the wind went round, and walks back down. Bram tells me who deserves them. Bram has the entire order of merit settled by the 3rd day, and it changes twice, and on both occasions the man at the top of it has recently given Bram something. The 2 I choose are Odd, who can no longer find the needle to mend net, and Raid, who cannot make out his own grandchildren at the length of a boat. I choose the net, and I have to say why, with both of them standing on the same piece of sand, because there is nobody else to say it, and nowhere on this island to say it out of earshot. Odd mends for 2/3 of this beach, and there is nobody who can do it at his speed, I say. That is what 4 loads buys. It buys net, and net is food, and that is my whole reason, and there is no better one underneath it. Raid does not shout. He waits until I have finished, and then he says it in a level voice with about 40 people standing there. You are not giving them out, he says. You are handing them out. You want your own hands on every one of them. If you wanted us to see, he says, you would put that girl on the stones, and every pair of hands beside her that could hold one, and there would be 40 by the ash. There are 2. And you are standing in front of both. Some of that is not true. There is no fuel for 40 and no glass for 40, and Ide has been on the stones since her 2nd week here. What is true is the bit about my hands. I have nothing to say back, so I say nothing, and standing on a beach saying nothing is an answer of its own, and every person there reads it correctly. Raid works his shift out and does not speak to me again for a month. Odd wears his and men's 9 hours a day and starts taking work off 2 other men, and by the end of that week there are 7 people who cannot get a net mended because Odd is doing all of it and will not stop. The pair goes missing on the 4th night. Odd sleeps with them shut in his fist, and they are gone out of his fist. They turn up 2 days later in the sand at the south point with 1 lens out of the frame and the frame bent open. That is what a thing looks like when it is taken by somebody who wanted it and then kept by somebody who could not use it. Nobody is ever named for that, and nobody is ever punished. Whoever took them had to go on living on this beach afterwards, and I suspect that was enough, and I do not enjoy how quickly I get comfortable with that. The second one is worse because it is done in daylight where people can watch. A man called Furl takes the other pair off his own father and says the old man can have them back on the day the racks give his son a place. His father does not argue with him about it, and that is what stays with me. He sits down by the fire and puts his hands flat on his knees and waits, because he has been waiting for things for 60 years, and he has got good at it. Mother Salt settles the 2 of them in one afternoon, and she does it by standing in a doorway. She goes and stands in the mouth of the shelter where Furl sleeps, and says nothing whatever, and stays there while everybody on the island walks past her on the way to the racks. By mid-afternoon the spectacles are back on his father's face, and Furl is at the racks, and neither of them has been spoken to, and nobody mentions it again in front of either of them. Then she comes and finds me and gives me the line I am going to be living inside from here on. A thing small enough to go in a pocket, she says, is a thing people will hate each other over. Water never fitted in a pocket. That is the only reason I ever held any of this together. Tog Hall's cut kelp for nothing now and has opinions about the racks. He has had a birth for 9 days, and he is already explaining to men who have cut weed for 20 years that they are stacking it against the wind. The ash is 9 months out. She says it at the count on the first morning of every month, and nobody has ever asked her to, and nobody has ever asked her to stop. The rules I said in front of the fires are 2 months old, and I have not stood behind one of them since the evening I said them. Steen's boy went down on his own at the point because the crew was short, and he wanted to be finished before dark. A man called Ove went out at dusk, with the rope left coiled on the sand behind him, where a rope is no use to anybody. I heard about both of them. I said nothing to either, because I was up the slope, and because a man who is being come to does not go down the hill to shout at anyone. Pugo has a count, and he says it out loud every evening the way Mother Salt says hers. 2 lengths of rope, 1 anchor stone, 1 pot, 1 boat. He has been saying the same 4 things for 3 weeks, because there has been nothing to add. He is 9, and the thing he actually wants is not on that list at all. He wants to go to the breath and come up with a stone and be counted a man, and he tells anybody who will listen that the whole business is stupid, and he tells them about twice a week, which is how I know. That evening, the 2 sons off Osso come and find me on the sand, the ones who handed their father out over the side of the boat, and the father is with them, and there is nothing on his face at all, because I have not got to him and cannot get to him for 6 weeks. One of them uses the word miracle. He uses it twice. Then the brother starts the entire thing again from the beginning, because he was not there for the first telling and wants it said properly. And I stay for the second telling. That is all I do wrong that evening, and it takes exactly as long as a second telling takes. Pugo lifts the mask off the shingle while the 4 of them are talking at me. He goes round the point where the beach turns and the bottom drops away, and he goes on his own at dusk with nobody on a rope and nobody counting. He is not being reckless. He has a reason, and it is a good one. There is an anchor stone out past the 3rd rock that is bigger than anything he has ever brought up, and if he lands it on his own, then the list gets longer, and somebody has to stand there and look at him while he says it. Which is the same reason I am standing at the top of the beach letting a man tell me twice what I am. He is 9 and I am 44, and we want precisely the same thing, and only one of us is going to be charged for it tonight. He goes deeper than he has ever gone, and he does it badly, and he does it badly as people do when nobody is watching. He goes down fast because going down slowly costs air. Something lets go in his right ear at the bottom. He does not know what it is. He comes up too quick on top of it, and he comes up with the stone. He drags it into the shallows and leaves it standing there and says nothing to anybody, because there is nobody at that end of the beach at all, because every person on this island is up at the fires, listening to 2 men from Osso. There is blood on his neck. He washes it off in the sea, which is the right thing to do, and also the thing that makes it invisible, and then he comes up to the fires and sits down on the far side of me, with his good ear turned towards the noise. He does not eat. Pugo does not eat, and for the whole of that evening I am 4 paces from him being told what I am, and I do not notice. He answers ID twice, and both times he answers something slightly to the side of what she asked. She looks at him. He says his list. 2 lengths of rope, 1 anchor stone, 1 pot, 1 boat, and 1 more anchor stone. Nobody asks him where the second stone came from. It has been a long day, and a second anchor stone is not interesting to anybody. On the sand at the south end, long after the fires are down, Pugo lies on his back where nobody counts and holds his breath. He gets to 30 and stops. He gets to 30 again and stops. Each time he stops, he keeps one hand pressed flat to the right side of his head, and he does not take it away in between. In the morning, I ask him to fetch the small stone off the flat rock, and he does not move. I ask him again from the same side, and he does not move. Then Ide says his name from the other side of him, and he is on his feet before she has finished it. I say his name from the right and get nothing. I say it from the left and he turns round with his mouth full and asks me what. Then I put my hand out and he gives me the mask straight away without one word of argument, and that is the worst thing that happens to me on this island. There is dried blood in the whirl of his ear where he could not reach. He tells me he fell on the rocks. Then he gives me a second version in which a wave put him against the boat. Then he stops, because Ide has sat down in front of him and taken hold of both his wrists, and is not saying anything at all. He is 9. There is one boy on this sea who can find the bottom by feel through brown water, and he went and did it alone in the dark so that somebody would have to look at him. And I stand there on the sand and I count. I do not decide to do it. It comes up out of me the way it came out of Marek on the rail, flat, at the same speed, costing nothing, and I get to about 22 before I hear whose voice I am doing it in. Pugo asks me whether he can still go down. Not now, I tell him. He asks me when. And that is the first question anybody on this island has ever asked me that I answer with a lie, and both of us know it while it is coming out of my mouth. Pugo says it once, on the second morning, sitting on the upturned boat with the mask in his lap. I am not going down again, he says. Then he asks what needs doing. He never says it a second time. Not to me, not to Ide, not to the 4 boys who would have gone off a cliff behind him. He says it once, and then arranges the world so that nobody ever has to ask him about it again. By the end of that week there is a crew, and it is his. Who goes down is settled the night before, in front of the ones who are not going. Who holds the line is settled the same way. Who counts is settled last, because counting is the job nobody wants. He puts Sten's boy on the line and Av on the counting, which is a joke that 3 people on this beach understand, and one of the 3 is Av. There are 3 masks now. Each one is 4 loads and a boot's worth of leather that nobody has to spare, so the third comes out of the tongue of my own, and I go about with a flapping boot for the rest of that season, and Pugo considers this the funniest thing that has ever occurred on these islands. He runs all of it better than a grown man would, because a grown man would want the credit for a good day, and Pugo only wants the list. Marek comes over on a kell boat and gets out of it himself, and walks up the beach without asking anybody anything, and finds the back of the kiln, where the wall is warm and where nobody goes because there is nothing there. He waits for me at the back of my own dome as a man waits outside a door. He is 70. He counted my brother up out of that water and he counted me down into it, and he has called numbers over the rail of the same boat for 3 generations of boys. He does not use the word. He says he has been told I do a thing for the eyes. I ask him which way his go. He tells me he can count a boy under the water and cannot see the boy's mother on the shore, and that he has been calling the numbers at a beach he cannot make out for 4 years. I ask him how long. Longer than 4 years, he says, and then he asks me not to mention any of it to the boats. That is all he comes for. He does not ask for the glass first. He asks for the quiet first, and I give him the glass on the black sand in front of everybody, with 3 boats in and the whole island up off the racks for it, because I want it seen. I can dress that up, and I have 3 reasons ready, and every one of them is true. Marek is Tharn. Tharn has to watch it happen. A thing done privately for a man out of Tharn is a thing Tharn gets to pretend never happened. And underneath all 3 is the same appetite that put a pair of close work spectacles on Bram's face, and it has not gone anywhere, and it is not going to. So they call the beach up, and Marek stands in the middle of them and lets me put them on him, and he keeps his hands down at his sides the whole time, like a man being measured for something. Then he looks at the water, then he looks at the boats, and the men in those boats are the men he has been calling numbers for, and every one of them watches him find their faces one at a time, and not one of them says a word. That silence is the loudest thing this beach has produced since Mother Salt looked down into her own ladle. On Tharn, they bang oars for a boy who comes up with a stone. Nobody bangs anything for Marek. He understands it exactly, and he puts one hand up as far as his own shoulder and leaves it there. Then he asks his question, into the middle of all of them, plainly, in the voice he uses for numbers. Can I stop counting now? He says. Nobody answers him, Not one person on that sand, and I am the worst of them, because I am the one he came to, and I stand there working out what a good answer would sound like until the moment for any answer at all has gone past. He goes back down to the boat and pushes off and counts the strokes out loud on the way, because that is what his mouth does, and the boy on the oars counts along with him without noticing that he has started. 9 days after that, Tharn sends 4 people across and does not call it an exile, and the word they send instead has been chosen by somebody who sat and thought about it for a while. A boy with a bad leg, 2 old men who have both been fishing longer than my brother, has been alive, and a girl of 19 that nobody on Tharn will marry. They arrive with food. The boat that brings them waits offshore to be sure they are taken. The man who brings them uses the word apprentice. He uses it 4 times inside 2 minutes. Mother Salt lets him finish, takes the food, gives him half a ladle, and asks him whether Tharn would like the boy back at the end of it. He says he will ask. Nobody on that beach laughs, which surprises me until I look at who is standing there. Half of them came off a boat exactly like that one, and every one of them is watching 4 new people find out what the sand does to your feet at noon. 171. She says at the count the next morning. Then she says it again, because the first number she said was the one from 4 days ago. She has been saying that count every morning for 20 years, and it has never once got away from her before. Bram appoints himself to meet the boats, and nobody else appoints him. He is simply at the water every time one comes in, telling people where things are and getting 2 out of 3 of them wrong, and being the first face anybody sees on this island. Then the sums stop closing, and they stop closing where the beach can see, because I do them out loud standing on the rock at the morning count where she does hers. 4 loads to a plate. 1 plate is 1 face. There are 31 people on this island who need one, and there are now 171 people on this island, and there are 6 islands out there, and every one of the 6 has had a boat on this beach since the day she looked into that ladle. 6 days a month at the south end of the cliff. The racks. The cook fires which get fed first, or the argument is over before it starts, which comes out at 9 plates in a month if nobody eats hot food, and 4 if they do. Odds Needle. Merrick's boats. A woman on Vantry that Des has not laid eyes on in 9 years, 4 plates a month, and 1 pair of hands on this sea that can fit a plate to a face, and no hull that can reach the place where the wood is. So I say the sum I cannot reach out loud on the rock, because a thing said out loud on this island is a thing that exists, and a thing kept in your head is a thing you are hiding. A hull that crosses to the coast and comes back with cargo is 60 planks, 4 hides, a year of pitch, and 3 men who know how to lay a strake. The boat we pulled off the bottom is not one, and is never going to be one. It is a beach boat with a split strake, and it does what it does. 60 planks. There is not 1 tree standing on any of these islands. Every piece of wood out here came off the coast 3 days south and grew old in the weather. I'd ask me what the coast looks like, and when I start on the wood she stops me and says, that is not what she asked. She wants to know what the place looks like. I tell her what I have of it. A hot room and 2 streets and a wharf I walked the length of once a week for 20 years. Houses with more than 1 room in them. A market with 4 kinds of bread on it, and a woman who sold nothing at all except thread. She does not say anything for a while, and then she asks how long the crossing takes in a hull that can make it. 3 days, I say. She takes the number off me and puts it down again. 3 days. Then she goes back to the stones and grinds 400, and she says the count out loud the entire way up to 400 without breaking once, which she only ever manages when she is not thinking about the count. The girl of 19 that nobody on Tharn would marry is called Wen, and by her 4th day she has taken the pitch off Ide and the boiling off 2 other people, and is doing all of it herself, badly. By her 9th day she is doing it better than any of us, and telling us so at some length. Hun explains to Wen how the pitch works on the 2nd morning of her already doing it. She lets him get all the way to the end of it. Then she thanks him by name, and he does not know what to do with that, and goes off and mends his rope for an hour. Tharn will trade. Tharn will trade water and coal and planks and cloth and men, and has been trading all 4 with Kel since before Mother Salt's mother. There is exactly 1 price Tharn will not name at any figure, and that is letting a girl leave the island. A daughter is somebody's ration. And a hull that can reach the coast and come back is the only thing on this sea that does not need anybody's permission for anything at all. My sister is called Ness. She is 11, and she eats on the days my brother goes into the water, and there is a sealed jar on a shelf in that house that she has not opened, and I have been on this island 4 months, and I have not sent her one word. Then I change the subject. ID lets me change it. Mother Salt looks at me over the rim of the ladle for a while, and then says, the ash is 8 months out, which is her way of not letting me change it at all. Vel comes to the burn 8 days later, in daylight, in his own boat, alone, and he comes in the middle of the afternoon, when there is no way on this sea of arriving quietly. He does not come up the beach. He stands in the shallows, holding the bow as a man holds it when he does not mean to be anywhere long, and about 70 people find themselves work that has a view of him. He asks for nothing. He does not ask after our mother, he says nothing about the vote, and he does not look at the kiln once, which takes doing because it is the only object on this island above waist height. He asks one thing, and he asks it of the beach in general rather than of me. How deep do they hold, he says, the masks? What depth is it before the seal lets go? ID answers him because ID has the number and I do not. 6 fathoms and a bit, she says, and past that the water gets in behind the leather at the cheek. He asks whether that is with a rope. She says with a rope, and 2 on the line and a man counting. He says thank you to her and not to me. Then he pushes off and rows home, and it takes him the better part of an hour, and nobody on this beach pretends to be doing anything else while he does it. Nobody speaks for a while. Then Bram tells 4 people what Vel came for, and Bram is wrong about it. And they all believe him because his answer is simpler and finishes faster. A man does not row 3 miles to ask where a seal stops holding unless he is thinking about what is under it. He was not asking what the mask can do. He was asking where it gives out. You only need to know where a thing stops if you are intending to go past it, and my brother does 41 seconds, and 41 seconds is a number every man on this sea can say. And there is a house on Tharn that eats on the days he is in the water, and a girl in it who has not opened her jar. I do not say any of that to Ide, and I do not say it to Mother Salt. I go up the slope and sit down in the mouth of the kiln where the brick holds its warmth, and I say it out loud in the dark to nobody at all, because it is the kind of thing that has to be said somewhere. The stones at the breath are not a ritual. That is the thing nobody explains to a boy before they row him out there, because everybody already knows it, and nobody has said it aloud in 100 years. The heat comes up through the seabed and fuses the shingle into lumps as hard as anything on these islands, and those lumps go south 3 days to the coast and come back as grain. A man who goes down at the breath is not proving anything. He is at work, and the boy's dive is the day he is told what the work is. Tharn's whole fleet brings up about 40 in a day. 4 boats, 8 men, a season of it, and 40 is a good day, because a man who cannot see the bottom is a man feeling about in brown water with his hands for as long as his chest will let him. Orl speaks for Tharn's boats, and Orl comes to the burn himself to say the number. The first time in 4 generations that anybody from Tharn has come to this beach to offer anything. He says 1 stone and 5, Mother Salt says 1 and 3. He says 1 and 5 again, and then he looks at the beach he is standing on, at 171 people and 3 hulls, and a dome with smoke coming off it, and he says 1 and 4 before she has to say anything else. 1 and 4. Said aloud on black sand, in front of every person on this island, and nobody cheers it. Pugo says it back to himself twice to be sure he has the shape of it, and then goes and starts settling who is on the line tomorrow. On a beach on Delm, a gray-sailed hull is drawn up on the shingle, and a man called Hasek walks the length of a line of 11 people with 1 finger out, touching nobody, counting. He haggles aloud with the man selling them, and he does it pleasantly, as you talk about weather. 2 for the older ones. He taps his own front teeth with a fingernail while he waits, and he waits a good while, because the man selling has not greeted him properly yet, and Hasek does not begin until he does. We go out to the breath on the 4th morning after that, 4 boats, 3 masks, 9 of us, and Pugo standing in the bow of the beach boat with a rope in his hand and his own mask in his belt, where he is not going to use it. Tharn's boats are already there. They have come to watch, and none of them pretends otherwise, and I count 17 men in 4 hulls who have taken a working morning off to see this. Stin's boy goes over the side first, and he is up again in 11 seconds with a stone in each hand, and he holds them out to be taken off him and is already turning to go back down. There is no trick in it, and there is no cleverness. He can see the bottom, he can see which of the lumps are the fused ones and which are only shingle, and he can put his hands on 2 of them and be up again before the men in those boats have finished getting their breath. He does it again, then Ov goes down and does it, and then the 3rd mask goes over the side, and there is a rhythm to it inside the first hour, down, 2, up, hand them in, down. Marek keeps the count. He is in the boat that he has always been in, on the rail he has always been on, wearing a pair of my spectacles, and nobody suggested he do it, and nobody asked him to stop. 40 before the sun is off the water. He says it flat, the way he says everything, at the same speed as every other number, and 4 boats of Tharn men hear him say it, and not one of them says anything back. By noon, it is 91. By the middle of the afternoon it is 160, and Pugo has begun making them rest in turns, because they will not stop on their own, and he knows exactly what 4 boys look like an hour before they hurt themselves. Marek is still counting, and the counting means the precise opposite of what it meant the last time he counted for me. A man in the nearest Tharn hull asks what a mask costs. 4 loads of coal, I tell him, and a boot, and a boy small enough for the leather to take a seal on his cheek. He asks whether I would make him one. Yes, I say, and then I give him the rest of it. He would still not see much because the water is only half of the problem, and his own eyes are the other half, and he has been squinting at me for the whole of this conversation. He does not care for that. Then he looks back at the boy in the water, and he cares for that a good deal less. Hun is aboard the beach boat with us, and spends most of the morning telling Ov that the stones will come up faster if the crew work in from the edges instead of out from the middle. Ov is counting and does not answer him. They work in from the edges after the rest, because Pugo says so, and nobody afterwards remembers who said it first, except Hun. Vel comes out at about that hour. He comes in his own boat, alone, and he is not hired and he does not ask to be, and he takes his shirt off in front of everybody and goes over the side of his own hull on his own account. 41 seconds is his number, and every man out here can say it. He does 43. He does 43 twice, which nobody out there has ever seen done, and he comes up the second time with 1 stone. 1 stone in 43 seconds? Sten's boy is 9 and has just gone down and come up in 14 with 2. He is not beaten by a better diver. There is no better diver on this sea, and there never will be. He is beaten by 4 boys who can see where they are going, and he understands it out there in the water before he is back at the hull, because he is not stupid, he has only ever been the best. He gets his hand on his own gunwale and holds the stone up out of the water so the boats can see it. That is what you do. It is what they did for him when he was 16. Not one man out there bangs an oar. 4 hulls, 17 men, and every one of them looking at the water as though the water might have something to say about it. And it is the same silence that came after Marek said 22. I am the only man out there who has heard it from the inside. I would not wish it on him, and I am also not sorry, and both of those are in me at once, and neither of them will move over for the other. He does not row home. He comes over to us instead, which takes more out of him than the dive did, and he ships his oars alongside the beach boat and sits there in the bottom of his own hull with the stone between his feet. Then he says the price, and nobody has asked him to. He says it out loud in front of the boats, because nothing out here gets said any other way. A diving man's house eats on the days he is in the water, he says. That is how it is arranged and how it has been arranged since anybody can remember. 40 stones in a day, 4 boats, 8 men, and the houses behind them. Then he says the figure his own house ate on. Then he says what 1 in 4 does to that figure. Then he stops, because he has done the sum aloud in front of 17 men who have all just finished doing it themselves. I ask him what his house eats now. He says it eats what it can get, and then he says our mother's name, and then he tells me a thing I have not asked for. He rowed the boat himself, so that she would have somebody left to be frightened for. That is what he says, with his hands flat on his knees, and it has nothing to do with the vote looking like honor. He has been the one she worries about since he was 14, and he never worked out how to stop being it. And if she was going to lose one of us that afternoon, he says, he wanted to be the one holding the oars when it happened. I work that out about one breath before he finishes saying it, and I say nothing at all, and saying nothing is the right thing to do, and it is still a failure, because the correct thing and the useful thing are two different objects, and I have got hold of the wrong one again. So I offer him a place. I do it with everybody standing round, because that is how it has to be done out here, and because I want the boats to hear a man from the burn offering work to the champion of Tharn. Come on, the crew, I say. You can hold a line better than anybody on this water, and you will eat what we eat, and your house will eat what our houses eat. He says no. He says it without any heat in it, and he says it straight away, and then he does me the courtesy of telling me why, which he does not owe me. If I come out here, he says, she is on Tharn with nobody, and you are not going back for her, and I cannot carry her, because Tharn does not let a girl leave the island, and you know that as well as I do. I ask him about Nez. He tells me she has stopped eating in front of our mother, a thing an 11-year-old works out on her own and thinks nobody will notice. He tells me about the jar on the shelf that she takes down and puts back. She has not opened it because it is the last thing our father sealed, and the day it comes open there is nothing of him left in that house. Then he asks me one question, and it is the only thing he asks me all afternoon. Can you make a hulk here? He says. Not yet, I say. And he takes that answer the way a man takes a stone off a boy without comment and reaches down and picks up his oars. He does not say anything unkind, and he does not say goodbye. He rows home with one stone in the bottom of his boat, and the 4 Tharn hulls go with him, and the last of them waits for him to be well ahead before it follows, which is the kindest thing anybody from that island does all season. We come in at dusk with 193 stones, and 1 in 4 of them is ours, and Mother Salt counts them into a pile on the black sand where the Exile boat used to land. That night, this island eats hot food twice, because nobody can think of a reason not to, and Pugo says his list at the fire, and it takes him a long time to get through it now, and halfway along it he loses his place and starts again from the rope, and everybody lets him. I go and stand at the water's edge afterwards and look out at Tharn in the dark, and there is one light on it, and it is not our house, because our house has not had oil in it since the rain. The ash is 7 months out. Mother Salt says so at the count in the morning, standing on the rock, and then she says the thing I have not thought about since the day the bones came up, and she says it looking at the pile of stone on the beach. They come for the take as well as for the people, she says. They always have. A beach with 193 stones on it in an ash month is a beach worth putting in for. Anso comes to the burn to collect a boy, and that is genuinely all he comes for. Tharn wants the one with the bad leg back for the season, and has sent the man everybody obeys to fetch him, which tells you what Tharn thinks of this beach now. He is 61. He reads the stars for 4 islands, and he has laid the course for every long crossing on this sea since before I was born the first time. And he comes in standing in the bow with a knotted cord in his hand and lets a younger man bring the hull up the sand. Then he gets out, and I watch the whole of him do it. He puts 2 fingers on the rail before he moves and keeps them there while he steps, and once he is on the sand, he stops for the length of a breath. Then he walks up the beach in a straight line at a speed nobody would ever question, 11 paces from the water to where the shingle starts. He has counted them off some other man's back on the way in, and he has them exactly right. 5 months ago I would have seen a careful old man being helped ashore. I have spent 4 months holding a plank up in front of faces, and I have him in the time it takes him to walk his 11 paces. Nobody asks me for anything. Anso does not mention his eyes and does not mention the glass, and spends his first hour talking to Mother Salt about water as 2 people talk, who have both been rationing something for 20 years. He is good company. The beach likes him inside a quarter of an hour, and then I go and offer, out loud, in front of 9 people, before he has finished his half ladle. I hear my own voice doing it, and I do not stop it, because the man who lays the course for 4 islands has come to my island, and I want to be the one who hands him his eyes. Heidi says one sentence against it, quietly, at my shoulder. She says that he has not asked. I talk over her, with something about how the whole point of it is that nobody should have to ask, which sounds well, and which is not what is happening on that beach. Anso says yes without any fuss whatever. He says yes as a man accepts a seat that is offered him, and then asks me 3 questions about how long it takes, and not one about how it is done. The pair takes 4 days on the stones, and on the second of them, I put on a performance. I have kept one thick blank back for a month, the ugliest thing I have made since the lump, fat through the middle and cloudy at the rim, no use to any face on this island. We do it at noon on the black sand with the whole island called up off the racks, and the cook fires laid and cold, and nobody allowed to go near them with a flame. I hold the blank about a hand above a fistful of dry kelp fiber. There is a spot of light on the fiber the size of a grain of sand. It sits there doing nothing at all for as long as it takes 179 people to start wondering whether they have been called down for nothing. Then the fiber goes brown, and then it goes, and there is a thread of smoke standing up off the sand in the middle of a crowd, and the noise those people make is the loudest this island has made since the day I landed on it. Fire out of the sun. On a beach where one man's day at the racks buys 1 load and 1 plate of glass eats 4, I stand there at noon and light all 6 cook fires off the sky for nothing, one after another, slowly, because I am enjoying myself, and I see no reason to hide it. Pugo is allowed to hold it. He burns his own thumb inside the first minute, then puts a small hole in Bram's shirt while Bram is still wearing it, and Bram is so pleased to be involved in any of this that he does not notice until the smell gets round to him. The island cheers. Anso does not cheer. Anso waits until the noise has come down, and then asks me the only question anybody puts to me that day that is worth anything. What does one of those cost to make? 4 loads, I say, the same as a plate. He says nothing at all to that. Ed is looking at me from the stones, and I do not look back at her, and that is a decision, and I make it quickly, and I make it on purpose. We fit him on the 4th afternoon down on the beach, with everybody there. He lets me do the last of it, and he sits very straight on the flat rock with his hands on his knees while I bend the bone at the bridge, and then he stands up and looks at the sea. 6 years. 6 years of laying courses off memory, off the feel of the swell coming up under a hull, off other men's accounts of a horizon he could not see for himself. He stands there a long time, and nobody on that beach makes a sound. The swell is running 2 ways, he says. There is one out of the south, and an older one under it out of the west. He has known that one was there for 11 years by the way it comes up under a bow, and this is the first time in 6 that he has watched it happen, and it is the last thing he says about the sea. He turns his head north, then east, then up the slope, and then he counts the fuel pits out loud, in order from the char pits at the south end round to the peat store under the ridge, and he gets to 9, and there are 9. Then he asks how many loads a plate eats. 4, I say, and I say it fast and I say it well, because the man who reads the stars for 4 islands is looking straight at me with my own glass on his face. The whole of me is standing there being looked at. I would have told him anything he asked me in that minute, and what he asked me for was the price of a plate, and he had it out of me in about the time it takes to say it. He nods. He asks how many days a month the cliff is worked, and I tell him. He asks how far the kelp beds run out from the south point, and Pugo tells him, because Pugo knows it better than I do, and is delighted to be asked by a man off Tharn. Then he thanks the island rather than me, and goes and sits down with the old men at the fires, and stays there until it is dark. Later, he talks about the water for an hour, and he is the best talker I have heard since the coast. He gives the run from Delm to Vantry as a thing you could hold in 2 hands, the marks in order, the ridge that lies down when the light goes, where a hull will end up if you lose it. And in the middle of that, he says that he had a set-off sab wrong for years, that the 2 summits do not come into line where he had them coming into line, and that between that and one thing and another it has come to 11. He does not explain the 11. He goes straight on to the next mark, and it is a good mark, and everybody at that fire follows him to it. I do the arithmetic on my own with both hands round a cup, and it takes me the whole of the next mark to finish it. It is late by then. I have been on my feet since before light, and there are 19 people round that fire, and I have been looked at all day by a man whose good opinion I have decided I want. Hun starts on the ash. He starts it in the wrong place, which for Hun is always the mountain, and comes forward as far as the month it falls in, and then goes back to the mountain because he has left out the wind. Anso is listening to him properly, which almost nobody has ever done. And I cut him open in front of all of them. Hun, I say, you have said the word ash 6 times now, and you have not yet arrived at a verb. I get the laugh. I get a big one, and it goes round that fire and comes back round again, and it runs on considerably longer than a thing like that ever should, in exactly the way the laugh at Bram ran on, and it is the same beach doing it. Hun stops in the middle of his own sentence. He does not finish it, and he does not defend himself, and he does not go anywhere. He sits back down on the sand and puts his hands on his rope and waits for somebody else to start talking. Anso gives it back to him. He says something to Hun about the wind, kindly, as a question, so that Hun has somewhere to put his answer. Hun agrees with Anso about the wind, and then says nothing else for the rest of that evening. And I go to bed pleased with myself, which is the thing out of all of it that I would take back first if anybody were ever in a position to offer. Anso stays 4 more days. He asks about the racks, about the cliff, about how many stones the crew can lift in a day, about what the coast pays for one. He is charming to Mother Salt and honest with Pugo, and he learns the name of every person who brings him anything. He never once asks how glass is made. Ide says so out loud on the 4th evening in front of Wen and 2 others. 4 days, she says, and not one question about the dome. I hear it. I hear it perfectly clearly. I tell her he is old and he is polite, and I go up the slope to grind. On Tharn in the morning, Anso walks the whole length of his own hull without once putting a hand out. At the mast he stops and reaches for it out of habit, and then takes the hand back and stands looking at it for a moment. Then he turns round and looks out across 4 miles of open water at a black island with smoke coming off the middle of it, and he stays there looking at it until a boy comes down the beach and asks him whether he is unwell. 9 days later Marek brings the rest of it over, and Marek has it right, because Marek says numbers and nothing else, and never once decorates any of them. Anso has built nothing. He has bought nothing, he has not sent for anything, and he has not asked anybody on any island for a thing. What he has done is take a boat out to the ridge off Sab with his cord and his new eyes, and sit there for 2 days taking bearings. And then he went to Sab, and then he went to Vantry, and he sat down with the elders of both islands and told them what the bearings say. They come at first light, the hour when everybody on this island who is going to be awake is already down at the racks with a knife, and there are 14 of them, and all 14 are divers. That is the thing worth holding on to about that morning. Tharn does not send fighters because Tharn has not got any. It sends 14 men who have had no working season since the afternoon my brother did 43 twice, and whose houses eat on the days they are in the water. Nobody is killed. Nobody is so much as pushed. They come up the east slope in a line with their hands empty and stand round the dome, and the 4 boys on the bellows stop and look at them, and then look at me. Vel is one of them. He stands at the back on the seaward side, and he does not look at me once, and he does it so well that I know he has been practicing it in a boat for the whole 3 miles. And Bram walks them to the fuel pits. He does it without being asked, and he goes out ahead of them across the slope, pointing things out, the char pits, the peat store below the ridge, which end of the racks is dry. He is wearing the spectacles I ground for the wrong eyes, and he is talking the entire way, and he has never been happier in his life than he is on that slope. He learned every one of those pits standing next to me on the day I put a thing on his face in front of the island, and then told the island it was the wrong thing. He carried it over on Tog's boat for 1 ladle out of his own ration, and he has been carrying it ever since. That is the bill for a laugh I let run too long. It has taken 8 weeks to come, and it arrives at first light with 14 men standing round my kiln. I let them have it. I do not argue with anybody about it, I do not appeal to oral about it, and I do not say one word to my brother, who is 4 paces away and still looking at the water. I walk into my own dome in front of 14 men off Tharn and 183 of my own, and I take out the leather roll of grinding stones, the pitch, the flat river stone off the shingle, and the long, thick blank, and I put all of it into a sack. Then I take Ide by the elbow, and the 2 of us walk down the slope, and neither of us says one word the whole way down, and every person on this beach stops what they are doing to watch us do it. The island decides I have given up. That is not unfair of them. From where they are standing, a man has just walked out of the only thing on this island worth having, carrying a bag, without a word to anybody. Mother Salt says it to my face at the bottom in front of Des and Wen, and 4 men off the racks. You have handed it to them, she says. I tell her I have not. She asks what she's supposed to call it then, and I tell her she can call it whatever she likes for 9 days. She does not know what I mean by that. Nobody does. I do not explain it either, and that is not cleverness on my part. It is that I am too angry that morning to be trusted with an explanation. What Tharn has taken is a dome, a throat, 2 hides on a frame, 9 pits of coal and peat, a beach of the cleanest sand on this sea, and 4 men who have watched me work for 4 months from about 30 paces. What Tharn has not taken is not a secret, and is not a trick, and cannot be carried off a slope by 14 men. Glass comes out of a kiln finished. That is the whole trouble with it. It comes out looking exactly like a plate of glass, hot and clear and done, and every hour you go on burning fuel after that is an hour of good coal spent on a thing that is already made. Cool it fast and it cracks by morning. Not always where anybody can see. It cracks somewhere inside itself and then lets go a week later in a hand or in a face. They are not fools, and I have never once thought they were. They try 4 things in 9 days, and every single one of them is intelligent. They bank the fire the first night and let the dome come down slowly. That is correct. Then they open it in the dark to look at what they have made, because they have been awake all night and they want to see it. Cold air on a hot plate. In the morning there are 2 plates and both are in pieces. They wrap the second lot in wet kelp to hold the heat in, the same as any of us would do with a hot stone in a cookpit, and it is a good idea, and it cools them faster and unevenly, and the wet side goes first every time. The third time, they quench them in seawater. That is not stupidity. That is a man who has watched a smith at work on the coast and is carrying across what he saw, and it is the loudest thing that happens all week, and the noise of it brings people up the slope from the fires. And on the 6th night they post a man to watch the dome from dusk to dawn to find out what I do that they are not doing. He watches it properly all night, and he goes back and reports honestly and correctly, and what he reports is that nothing happens after the glass comes out. He is right. Nothing does. The thing that has to happen is that the glass does not come out, and nobody who has been cold and hungry on a rock in the middle of the sea is ever going to arrive at burning 4 more loads on a plate that already looks finished. 9 days. Splinters on the floor of my kiln every morning, swept out onto the slope by men who have started sweeping without anybody telling them to. People sweep when they have run out of ideas and have to be seen doing something. On the 3rd day, they send a man down to ask a question sideways. He talks to Wen about the pitch for a while, and then about the leather, and then he asks whether the cooling is done with the pitch. She tells him no. He waits. She lets him go on waiting, and then tells him quite kindly that she is 19 and she is not simple, and he goes back up the hill with nothing at all. On the 6th day they send Vel. He comes down on his own halfway through the afternoon and stands at the edge of the fires, and I go out to him because there is nobody else on this beach who is going to. He asks how Pugo's ear is, I tell him. He asks whether the boy can hear on that side at all, and I say a little, close up, on a quiet day. He says that is a shame, and he means it, and then he stands there with his hands at his sides. I ask him what Tharn eats now. He says the boats go out and come back with what 4 blind men can find with their hands, the same as they always found, and that it was enough when it was the only thing there was. I ask him what Ness eats. He looks at the sand for a while and then tells me our mother eats first now, because she has stopped being able to stand for long, and Ness has decided on her own that this is how it is going to be arranged. And then he does not say the thing he came down the hill to say. He gets as far as opening his mouth for it twice, and both times it does not come, and he stands there with. So I say it for him. Come out on the crew, I say. It was there in front of 17 men, and it is still there now, with nobody watching and no boats out to see you take it. He says he cannot take it while there are 14 men off his own island standing round my kiln. Whatever they are eating this month, they are eating because they are up on that slope, and a man does not walk off a thing his neighbors are doing badly, so that the other side can pay him. He is right, and being right costs him, and he goes back up the slope with it. He tells them nothing about the cooling because he knows nothing about the cooling. I would have told him if he had asked. He does not ask, and I do not offer, and neither of us says why. Down at the dry end of the racks, out of the wind, Hun tells all of it to a man who is mending net. He starts at the beginning, which for Hun is the mountain. He works forward through the wind and the ash and the boats and the kelp beds, how many there were and where they were lying and on which morning he first saw them. He gets to the end of it. It takes him a while. Then the man holds up the net and says something about the net. On the 9th day, Oral comes down the slope and asks properly, in front of both islands, which he does not have to do, and which nobody would have blamed him for doing quietly. Tharn does not know how it is done, he says. Tharn has broken 9 days of glass. Tharn would like to be told, and Tharn would like the man who knows it to have his dome back this afternoon. So I tell him, and it takes one sentence, and I make sure it comes after the 9 days, and not before them. You have to keep burning it for a day after it looks finished, I say. There is nothing else in there, and there never was. 14 men stand on my slope and work out what 9 days of good fuel bought them. Oral gets there first, because Oral is the one who has to carry it home and say it out loud on his own beach. I take my price in planks and I name it out loud. 40, off the 2 old hulls Tharn has drawn up above the tide at the north end that nobody has put in the water since before the rain. Oral says 20, Mother Salt says 40, and adds nothing whatever to it. He says 40. That is the 5th time somebody who counted me out has had to stand on this black sand and ask for something, and when Mother Salt says the count the next morning, there is a note in her voice I have not heard in it before. Vel carries the planks up the slope himself. He does 11 trips, and he will not let anybody take an end off him, and on the last one he stands the plank against the wall of the dome and stays there a moment and then goes down to the boats without saying anything to me. The kiln is mine again by dark. The bellows are sound, the throat is clear, the sand is where it has always been, and Ide has the stones out of the sack before the Tharn boats are off the beach. And there is nothing at all to put in it. The peat store under the ridge is down to a day and a half. Nobody has cut kelp at the south point in 11 days, because the boats sitting out there will not let anybody near it, and nobody has been up the north cliff either, because the boats are under that as well. They have been there since the morning after Anso took his bearings. 11 days of it. And every person on this island who saw them assumed that somebody else had already said. The sum takes about 4 heartbeats, and I do it standing in the mouth of an empty dome with a full set of grinding stones in my hand. No peat, because the cliff has boats under it. No cut kelp, because the beds have boats over them. No coal, because coal is kelp and peat, with a day and a night spent on it. And therefore no glass, this week or next week or the week after that. 4 loads to a plate, 1 plate to 1 face. There are 22 people on this island waiting on a pair of spectacles with their names already said aloud in front of witnesses, and not one of them is getting any. The ash is 4 months out. Mother Salt says it at the count, and nobody makes any remark about it at all. That is new, and it is worse than the arguing was. Tog takes his boat out to the beds on the 2nd morning without telling anybody, and comes back at noon and says nothing whatever about where he has been. Everybody on this beach knows where he has been, and nobody asks him about it. Wen has the pitch pot cold for the first time since she took it off Ide, and she sits next to it most of a day anyway, because she has decided the pot is hers, and a thing that is yours does not stop being yours when it goes out. And one of the 22 comes up the slope to ask me when. Her name is Beale, she is 50, she goes short, and she has stood at that plank twice and been told twice. and she does not shout at me either. She asks whether it is true that the man on Tharn has been promised one. I tell her it is not true. He has had one. 4 months ago, ground by me over 4 days, put on his face on this beach in front of her. She says she remembers. Then she says she was standing at the back of it cheering, and asked me to say the number of loads again. 4, I say. She says it back to me once, and goes down the slope. And the man who has done this to us has not bought anything, hired anybody, or put himself on the water once. And so has done the only thing on this sea that a navigator can do and nobody else can. He has taken his cord and his new eyes out to the ridge off Sab, and sat there for 2 days, and he has taken the bearings properly for the first time since his eyes went, and he has found that he had them wrong. We go out to the beds on the 4th morning. Mother Salt, 4 men, me, the beach boat, and a Sab hull 200 paces off with 3 men in it who put their oars in the water when they see us coming, and then take them out again and wait. They are not armed. Not one of them has anything in his hands. They come alongside politely, and the oldest of them says good morning to Mother Salt by name, and asks after the cistern, and means it. Then he tells us that the beds are Sab's, that they have always been Sab's, and that Sab has been unable to say so for a generation because nobody alive could hold the marks. I ask him to show me. He is glad to. That is the thing about that morning I keep coming back to. He is glad to, and he stands me up on the thwart with a hand under my elbow so I do not go over, and he points. 2 summits, the one on Sab with the notch in it, and the shoulder of the ridge on Vantry standing behind it. When the 2 come into line, you are on the edge of Sab's water, and when the notch opens, you are inside it. There is no writing anywhere on this sea, and there never has been. A boundary out here is 2 hills coming into line, and 1 pair of eyes good enough to see them do it. He walks me back and forth along it in the boat until I can call it myself, and I can call it. It takes me about a quarter of an hour, and then I am standing on a thwart in the middle of somebody else's water with the marks in my own eyes. 4 generations. 4 generations of this beach-cutting kelp inside Sab's line and digging Vantry's cliff, and every one of us, including me, telling ourselves it belonged to nobody because nobody ever came out and said otherwise. They could not come out and say otherwise. They could not see the summits. The only reason the burn has eaten for 4 generations is that these islands went blind slowly enough that nobody noticed the moment they stopped being able to point at their own edges. And I gave the pointing back. I ground it myself over 4 days and bent the bone at the bridge with my own thumbs and put it on his face in front of everybody, and he thanked the island and went home and used it. Nobody is besieging anybody. That is the thing this beach cannot get its mouth around. There is no fleet. There are 4 boats belonging to men who are watching their own property, and every man in them is in the right and knows it and is being polite about it. Mother Salt asks him what Sab wants. He says Sab wants what is Sab's, and then he says he is sorry, and then he asks her whether it is true that a woman on this island got her eyes back off a boy. She says yes. He asks how long it takes to make a pair. She looks at him for a while and does not answer that one. And we row home. And Anso is paying those crews. Not in fish, and not in grain, and not in anything he has to carry. He goes down to the beach on Sab and stands in front of them and names them, 1 man at a time, to their faces, and promises each of them a pair of spectacles for the days on the water it costs him. There is no list anywhere. There has never been a list on this sea, and there is not going to be one. There is a man saying a name out loud in front of the man's neighbors, which on these islands is the strongest thing there is, and it is exactly how I do it, which is the only reason it is worth anything. It is also counterfeit, and I am the only man alive who knows how counterfeit it is, and there is nobody I can say it to who would not think I was making excuses. Mother Salt says the count on the morning after we come back from the beds. 186. It is the only number on this island that has gone up this week, and she says it slowly enough that everybody hears the shape of that. I go up to the cistern that afternoon for a reason that has nothing to do with any of it. Pugo has been complaining about a thing in the water, a taste, and I take the drop lens up with me, because it is in my shirt, and because I want an excuse to be away from people. I draw a cup off the top and set it down on a flat stone where the afternoon light comes across it, and I hold the drop lens over the cup and put my eye down to it the way I would over a splinter in a hand. There are things in it. They are moving. They are the size of nothing at all, and there are more of them than I can count in one cup, and they are going about their business in the water this island has been drinking since before Mother Salt's mother poured out of it. 6 children have died on this beach since I landed. 4 of them were under 3. I stand there over a cup with a piece of my own glass in my hand, and I do the arithmetic on that, and then I go and find her. She fights me on it in the open, and she is not wrong to. Boiling every drop for 186 people in a week with no fuel, Kier, she says. Name the fuel. Say the pit it comes out of. The lens, I say. We light every fire at noon off the sun, and we keep no flame overnight. She asks me what that saves. I tell her, and it is not much. It is the tinder and the banked fire and the coal that goes on keeping a light alive from dusk to dawn on this island every single night. She does the sum herself, in front of 30 people, and she does it against herself, which I have never once seen anybody do out here. Then she says it is enough. She says boiled from this morning, all of it, the whole ration, and anybody who drinks out of the rock unboiled can explain themselves to her. And that is the most expensive order given on this island in the whole time I have been on it, and she gives it in a week when we have nothing. Nobody notices it working. That is the thing about it. There is no morning when anybody stands up and says the children have stopped dying. They simply stop, and it is months before anybody puts the two together, and by then it is just how the water is done here. The lamp is Ides, and I want that said in the right place, here, before I get to what it did. She comes to me on the 5th night of nothing with a piece of Tharn's wreckage in each hand. 9 days of splinters got swept off my floor onto the slope, and nobody has moved them since, because they are worth nothing, because they are broken. 4 flat pieces, she says, set on edge, luted at the corners with pitch and clay, open at the top and open at the bottom, standing round a flame. I ask her what grinding it needs, and she says none. I ask her what fuel it needs. None, she says. It is already made. Tharn made it, and Tharn broke it, and it is lying on your slope. I did not think of it. I have been in front of a furnace for 20 years, and I have made bottles by the 100, and I did not think of a lamp, because I have been thinking about eyes since the night I counted 31 of them round a fire, and a man thinking about one thing is a man not thinking about anything else. She says so in front of Wen and Pugo and Des and 4 men off the racks, and there is nothing unkind in how she does it. She says it as she says a distance result, and then she says the whole of it belongs to her, and I say so too, out loud, and I say it twice, because once would have been me being gracious. Hun is standing at the edge of that. He starts to say something and gets 4 words into it, something about boats and about the second morning, and then he stops himself halfway and turns round and walks off down the slope. Nobody calls after him. I watch him go all the way down to the water, and I work out what I did at the fires on the night Anso sat with the old men, and I work it out about 11 days too late for it to be any use to this island at all. We build the first one that evening. It takes Ide and Wen and me the length of an afternoon, and it is ugly, and it leaks light out of one corner where the clay would not take, and it looks like something a child made out of what was left. At midnight, I carry it down and stand it on the black sand at the top of the beach, in a wind coming off the water that has already put out both cook fires and every open flame on this island. It burns. It stands there burning in the middle of a beach where nothing else will stay alight, and about 40 people come down out of the dark to look at it, and nobody says anything for a while. Then Pugo asks how many of them there are. 1, I tell him. He says no. How many could there be? And he is not looking at the lamp while he asks it. He is looking out at the water with his head on one side, working out how far apart you would have to stand 2 of them for a boat to be able to steer down the middle. Mother Salt says what it is before anybody gets into a boat, and she says it standing on the rock at the morning count with the whole island in front of her. This is theft, she says. It was theft when your grandfathers did it and did not know, and it is theft tonight and we do know. We are going to do it anyway because we have nothing, and afterwards we are going to pay for it, and I want every one of you to have heard me say that out loud before you get in a boat." Nobody argues with her. Two men look at their feet. Des says out loud that she would rather steal Pete than watch another winter of what we have got, and about 9 people agree with her, and that is the entire debate on this island. What this island has that Sab has not is 3 things, and I can name all 3 of them, and none of the 3 is courage or numbers or anybody's blessing. We have a light that no wind on this sea can put out. We have men who can open their eyes underwater, and we have a boy of 9 who has been down on that bottom more than anybody alive, and who can tell you where the rocks lie from the noise the swell makes going over them. What Sab has is 4 hulls, 3 men in each of them, and every right on this sea to be sitting where they are sitting. They stand off at night. They have to. No crew on these islands will lie on a lee shore in the dark under an ash haze with foul ground inshore of them, because that is how you lose a hull and everybody in it. And their grandfathers taught them that for the same reason mine taught me not to swim into what I cannot see. So they lie 200 paces out where the water is clean, and between them and the cliff there is a shelf of broken rock that nobody in his right mind takes a boat over in the dark. We take 4 boats over it in the dark, loaded, twice in one night, and we do it without a single man aboard being able to see the rock he is going over. ID sets 2 lamps on the Burn Zone ridge, one high and one low, about 40 paces apart, and when you are out on the water and those 2 lights stand one directly above the other, you are in the one channel through that shelf. Move a boat's width either side and the lights come apart. That is all of it. 2 lights in line and a channel you cannot see, and it works because the light does not blow out, and because a shielded flame shows where you put it and nowhere else, and Sab's boats never see either lamp at all, because the ridge is between them and both. Pugo sits in the bow of the first boat with his good ear turned forward. He calls it as we go, low and steady, from the bow. Rock on the left in about 6. Rock, coming. Clear. He is 9 and he does it for 4 hours and his voice does not go up once. We take 12 days of peat off that cliff in one night. It comes down the face in leather bags on a doubled line and gets carried out to the boats at chest height and loaded dry, and nobody speaks above the noise the birds are already making. The birds are the worst of it. 12 men working a cliff face in the dark under 4 generations of nesting birds, and the noise of them goes up and stays up, and it is the noise that hides us and the noise that means nobody can hear an order. So we do it by hand and by touch. 2 on the line, 4 on the bags, the rest chest deep in the water, taking them off the rope, and after the first hour, nobody needs telling anything, and the whole thing runs like a rack shift in the daylight. Ov works 4 hours in water up to his chest and comes out and gets straight back in. Sten's boy carries bags twice his own weight up a shelf he cannot see, and does not put a foot wrong once. Tog has the 3rd boat and tells the crew of it, in the dark, in a whisper, out on somebody else's water with a load of stolen peat in the bottom, that the island feeds itself. 4 men tell him to be quiet at the same time. It is the worst it has ever been, and he is entirely satisfied with it. 200 paces off, 3 hulls of Sab men ride at their oars all night watching an empty stretch of black water and doing their jobs properly. One thing goes wrong that night, and it is not the weather and it is not the rock, and I could have named the man it was going to be before we started if anybody had made me say it out loud. Bram has the high lamp. Bram has the easiest job on that ridge. Sit still beside a light for 4 hours and do not move, and about halfway through he stands up and carries it 40 paces down the slope to where he can see the boats working. The 4th boat comes in on the line he has just moved and puts her bottom on the shelf, and the noise she makes doing it goes across that water and comes back off the cliff. Nobody drowns. It is chest deep and everybody in her is a diver, and they get her off before the tide turns, and they lose the whole load, 11 bags of it, straight down into 6 feet of water and mud. Bram apologizes for the next 2 days to everybody, except the 4 men who were in that boat. He apologizes to me twice, at length, and to Mother Salt, and to Heidi, And once, in front of people, to Pugo, who did not lose anything, and who says with his mouth full that it is all right. I am on the ridge for the last hour of it, next to the low lamp, because Ide will not let me on a boat where Pugo is calling rocks, and she is right, and she says so in front of two people. So I sit up there in the dark, with a shielded flame beside me, and watch 4 hulls I cannot see come home along a line I cannot see, one at a time, exactly where they are supposed to be, off 2 pieces of light standing one above the other. 12 days of peat on the beach by first light. The kiln has a charge in it before the sun is properly up, and the dome is talking again by the middle of the morning, and Wen has the pitch hot and is telling everybody about it. Sab comes in the afternoon, 6 of them, no weapons, drawn up on our beach in daylight because they have counted the peat off their own cliff, and they can count. Mother Salt does not deny one word of it. She tells them she said it out loud on this beach before the boats left, and she names the number of days we took, and she tells them the burn will pay for it, and that she is not going to say when, because she will not promise a thing she cannot yet put in a hand. And in the middle of that, a Sab man asks the question he put to me out on the water 4 mornings ago, and this time he asks it of Ide, because Ide is the one on that beach with a grinding stone in her hand. How long is a pear, he says. 4 days on the stones, says Ide. 4 loads of coal for the plate before that. 1 man on these islands who can fit one to a face, and 22 people on this beach whose names were said out loud before yours were. You could see it go through them. 6 men standing on black sand doing an arithmetic with nothing to do with peat. Anso has promised a pair to 4 crews. 4 crews is 12 men, and it is more than 12. Because the men in Vantry's boats have been promised as well. Every one of those promises was made to a face, out loud, in front of the man's own neighbors, the strongest thing there is out here, and it is the only reason any of them believed a word of it. He cannot make one. He has never made one. He does not own a kiln, a stone, a plate, or a pair of hands that has ever ground anything, and the only place on this sea where a pair of spectacles comes from is a dome on a slope belonging to the people he has just taken the fuel off. The oldest of them says it out loud on our beach, and he is not shouting when he says it. A cliff you own, he says, is worth nothing at all to a man who cannot see his own hands. Then he stands there a moment and asks me whether he can have a turn at the plank. Hun stands up while that is happening. He picks the worst possible moment in a day of bad moments, and he starts at the mountain. He gets through the wind and the ash, and comes forward to the boats, and goes back to the wind, and 2 men tell him to sit down, and he does not sit down, and he keeps going in entirely the wrong order until he arrives at the thing. He saw them on the first morning, not the 5th, not the 10th. The first. He counted 4 hulls off the beds at first light before any of us were up, and he watched them for 2 days, and he did not tell one person on this island. Somebody asks him why not. He does not answer that. He looks at me for about as long as it takes to breathe in, and then he looks at the sand. So I ask him, out loud, by name, in front of every person on that beach, and 6 men off Sab. Hun, I say, what should we do next? He has never been asked that in his life. He takes a while. Then he says a great deal of it, and most of it is not very good, and it comes out in the wrong order, and there is a stretch in the middle about the tide that has no bearing on anything. And there is one thing in it. He says that we should not go back to that cliff at all, ever, and that the moment Sab sees a burn boat under it again, everything we have just done becomes what we are instead of what we did once. I use that. I say out loud which of it I am using and whose it is, and I do not pretend the rest of it was good, because he would know, and because a man who has been talked over for a year can tell the difference between being heard and being humored. 2 of the Sab crews row home that night. The other 2 go the next morning, and none of them makes a speech about it, and none of them says anything to Anso, and that is the thing that finishes it. They do not stop believing him. That is what I want understood. I have been wrong about Anso since the afternoon I put glass on his face, and I stopped being wrong about him here. He was not lying to them. He was not proved wrong about the water. He is not wrong about the water now. He simply paid 4 crews in the one currency on this sea that he cannot mint, and they worked out the exchange in about an hour on somebody else's beach, and after that there was nothing to hold them out there. The oldest of them stands at the plank on our beach before he goes. He goes long. He gets a pair 11 days later, and he brings his own peat for it, and he is the first man from another island ever to do that. On Tharn, in the dark, Anso sits with the knotted cord across his knees and runs his fingers down it, which he has not needed to do with his hands since the 4th afternoon of last month. He counts under his breath as he goes. He stops at 11. He sits there with his thumb on that knot for a long time and does not go on to the next one. 4 days later, he sends the burn 4 loads of good peat off Tharn's own store. He sends them in daylight, in a hull with 3 men in it, and the message that comes with them is short, and it is thanks, and he asks for nothing at all. Mother Salt stands on the sand and watches those 4 loads come up the beach on other men's shoulders and says, to nobody in particular and loudly enough for the whole island, that this is the worst thing that has happened to us all month. The lead has been sitting on this beach for 4 months in a heap beside the racks, and nobody has given it a thought, and that includes me, and I am the one who is supposed to know what things are for. Pugo's crew brought it up out of the line of things the gray sails threw over, sounding leads with the line rotted off them, net weights, a strip of sheathing off some hull that went down before my mother was born. It is soft and gray and no use for a tool and no use for a pot, so there it has sat. You can melt lead in a cook fire, you can beat it out on a flat stone until it is the thickness of a fingernail, and then a good deal thinner than that. And if you lay that sheet against the back of a flat plate of glass and press it down with warm pitch and let it go cold and press it again, the 2 of them stop being 2 things. It takes me 9 days and 11 attempts, and the first 8 are rubbish, and the 9th comes off the bench the size of my palm, and it is the first true mirror on this sea. I look into it myself before anybody else does, because I do not put a thing on somebody's face that I have not had on my own, and that is a rule I have kept since the first mask went on to a boy of 9. The boy in it is 16. He is thin, he has my father's jaw, and he has burned scars across the backs of both hands that belong to a man of 44 who stood in front of a furnace every day but one for 20 years, and there is nothing anywhere on this sea that explains those hands. I look at that for a while. Then I put it face down on the bench and I do not turn it back over for a month, and I tell Ide the pitch has not gone hard yet, and she lets me have that one. There is a mark on the rim of it. 3 short cuts across the edge, put in with a wet stone while the plate is still soft enough to take them, and I have been putting them on everything I have made here since the first mask without ever mentioning it to anybody. Every man in that workshop on the coast marked his own. You did it so that when a thing came back broken, there was no argument about whose bench it came off. I have been doing it out here for 5 months out of pure habit, for nobody at all, because there is only the one bench. Before I sell anything to anybody, I pay Sab and Vantry for the 12 days of peat we took off that cliff in the dark. I do it in ground pairs, and I do it publicly on their own beaches in front of their own people, and I let them name the number, and I do not argue with any part of what they name. They say 6. 6 pairs, 4 loads each, 24 loads of coal and 24 days on the stones for 12 nights of stolen peat. It is the most expensive thing I do in any of this, and it is not close. It empties the dome for a month, and it puts every one of the 22 waiting on this island further back than they were, and Beale is one of the 22, and she stands on our beach and watches 4 of those pairs go into a boat. She does not say one word to me about it. 2 other people say a great deal at length, and one of them is Bram, who is against it, and who tells everybody he is against it until Mother Salt asks him whose peat he thinks he has been warming himself on. And because there is now not one spare pair of spectacles between here and Vantry, the mirror has to be carried 3 islands further than it needed to go, past every man who would have bought it on the way, all the way out to Kel. The elder of Kel is called Is. He is 70-something, and he has run that island since before Mother Salt held a ladle, and he takes the mirror out of the cloth himself and turns it over twice, looking for the trick in the back of it, and then he gets it the right way up. He does not say anything for a while, then he pulls it away from his own face fast, as a hand comes off something hot, and he holds it out at the length of his arm, with the glass turned away from him, and he says it in front of 40 of his own people. The boy has taken my soul into a plate. I do not correct him. I am not proud of that, and I am not ashamed of it either. He is a man of 70 who has never seen his own face except broken up on water, and I could stand there and tell him about lead and pitch and a flat stone, and instead I put my hands behind my back and let him say it a second time. He wants it. He wants it before he has finished being frightened of it, and he offers me 40 planks and 2 hides of good sailcloth, more than this island has been offered for anything since the day it was made a place to put people. And then I ask for 8 people as well. I say it out loud on his beach in front of his own islanders, the way everything is said out here. 40 planks, 2 hides, and 8 people off Kel who want to come. He refuses. He does not haggle it down, and he does not go quiet on me. He comes back with real anger in his voice, where everybody can see it, and he does not lower it once. Kel does not sell people, he says. Selling people is the thing that comes in under gray sails in the ash, and he is not going to be the first elder of that island to put a price on a head on his own sand. He is right. He is entirely right, and there is no answer to it, and I have just done a small, clean version of the thing that was done to me, standing on somebody else's beach, in daylight, with my own mouth. So I put the mirror back in the cloth and I tie it and I pick it up and I walk down that beach past 40 planks and 2 hides of sailcloth and 4 of my own people who came out with me, and I get into the boat. Mother Salt says nothing until we are off the shingle. Then she says it. "You have just thrown away the hull, Kier," she says. 60 planks. He had 40 of them lying on that beach. You will not see 40 planks in one place again this year, and you know it. I tell her I know it. A Kelman comes down after us, before the oars are properly in the water. He is about 30, and he wades out to the boat and puts his hand on the gunwale and asks whether he can be one of the 8. He goes long. He has gone long for 4 years, and he has a wife who does the close work for both of them, and he says that he will come and she will come, and that is 2 of the 8, and he says it standing in the water in front of everybody on that beach. Then a second one asks, then a woman with a boy asks, and Is has to stand there in front of his own island and watch his own people asking to be sold to an ash heap for a pair of glass. He pays. And what goes through me standing on that beach is the shape of it. He fights me for a day and a half over the 40 planks, and he concedes the 8 in about 4 minutes. The planks belong to Kel. The people, once they have asked aloud in front of witnesses, have become their own problem, and that is an arithmetic nobody on that beach needs explaining and nobody says a word about. The 8 come across 3 days later in 2 hulls with their bundles in the middle of the afternoon, and they are the 8 that Kel could most easily afford to lose. 6 who cannot see. 1 who cannot walk as far as our racks and is never going to work them, and 1 man of about 35 that Kel has sent because Kel has had enough of him, and Is puts that one into the boat himself and stands on the beach until it is off the shingle. I set that price. Nobody made me set it. I stood on another island's sand and asked for 8 heads, and I got the 8 that island did not want, which is exactly what 6 islands did to me, and I did it on purpose and in daylight, and I said the number myself. 203, says Mother Salt at the count that morning. Then she looks at the 8 standing on the sand with their bundles at their feet, and she says 211, and she says the second number while I am standing there looking at them as well. The ash is 3 months out, and she says that at the same count, and Hun says something about the gray sails, and this time 4 people turn round and let him finish it. Kel's boat goes south to the coast on the change of the wind, and there is 1 seat on it, and this island needs that seat for a man to go and find 3 shipwrights and talk them into a crossing they have no reason to make. ID takes it. She does not ask me. She tells me, standing at the stones with her leather roll already tied, and she tells me she will get the year of pitch and she will find the 3 men, and she will do both of them properly, and that she is going. And I say the small thing. I say that she is going because she wants to see the coast, and that the pitch is the excuse, and I say it in the flat voice I keep for numbers, so that it will come out sounding like an observation, and not like what it is. She says yes. She says both of those are true, and asks me which one of them I thought was going to stop her. Then she picks up her roll and goes down to the water, and she has heard the whole of what I said, and so have I. With her gone and 8 new mouths on the beach, Pugo puts grinders on the stones the way he put divers on the line. Who grinds is settled the night before. Who counts is settled last, for the reason it has always been settled last. And the counting out loud that Ide taught this island becomes the noise the burn makes after dark. 4 or 5 voices going up the slope, none of them in step with any of the others, all of them climbing to 400 and starting again at 1. I grind beside them, and I am slower than she was. I say so out loud on the second night, and nobody contradicts me, which is how I find out exactly how much slower. On Tharn, in a doorway out of the wind, the man Kel sent because he is trouble shows 4 men the motion of a hand on a grinding stone. Wet sand, flat stone, the disc between them, round and round and round. He does it over and over while they watch his wrist. He has the angle of it slightly wrong, and he does not know that. And they pay him in food and ask him to do it again. On his 4th night on this island, he is not on the stones, and he is not in the kitchen, and his bundle is not where he sleeps. Nobody looks for him. It does not occur to one person on this beach to go and look, because in 4 generations, nobody who was ever put on this island has had anywhere else to go. His name is Kor, and Kel put him in a boat with 7 other people because Kel had run out of ways to live alongside him, and I paid for him at a price I named myself, out loud, standing on somebody else's beach. He was on our stones for 4 nights. 4 nights is nowhere near long enough to learn to grind, and it is exactly long enough to learn how a wrist moves, and he has been on Tharn twice since he went, and both times he came away with food in his bundle. Anso is not inventing anything. That has to be said plainly, because half this beach spends the next month telling itself that he must have worked something out on his own, and he has not worked anything out, and he has never once tried to. He has the motion of a hand. He has men with hands, and he has the blanks, which come off my own slope out of the scrap, and the failed plates and the pieces Tharn broke, sold by somebody on this island to somebody on a boat, and that boat sells to a second boat, and the second boat lands them on Tharn. 3 pairs of hands between my slope and his stones, and every one of those pairs belongs to a person who can say quite honestly that they have never sold anything to Tharn in their life. I never find out who the first one is. I look for about 4 days, and then I stop looking, because whoever it is has been eating what everybody eats and standing at the same fire, and has a name that gets said on this beach every morning, and knowing it would cost me more than the scrap does. He ships them 11 to a crate, because 11 is what fits in a crate of kel timber with straw packed round them. 11 and 11 and 11, going out of Tharn on any hull that will take them. And he is doing it because of a promise. 4 crews and the men off Vantry's boats, named out loud, to their faces, in front of their own neighbors, for days on the water they have already spent. He has to put something into those hands, or he becomes a man on these islands who said a name and did not pay it. And the copies work. That is what I cannot get round, and I spend the better part of a month trying to. Most of them work. A man goes long, you put a thin lens in front of him, he sees further. It was never sorcery. There are only so many ways an eye can go wrong, and if you make 11 of them the same, some faces out of every 11 are going to be lucky. A man on Osso sees his own boat from his own doorway for the first time in 4 years. He says Anso's name out loud while he is doing it, in front of his family, and one of that family tells somebody on a kel hull, and the kel hull comes here. And the man who brings it to me brings it as good news. He is pleased about it. He tells me on my own beach that they are getting them on Osso now as well, and he has come 3 miles out of his way to be the one who tells me, because he thinks I will be glad it is working. I thank him for coming. I give him a hot ration, and I get his name, and I say it back to him twice. Then I go up the slope and start doing the wrong thing about 4 hours after that. Thinner. Thinner is faster on the stones and fewer loads to the plate, and I can put out 3 where I have been putting out 1, and I have the fuel back, and I have 22 names, and I can be first onto every island on this sea if I stop grinding to a face and start grinding to a middle. I get 3 hours into it. I have 4 discs down to a thickness I would not have taken off an apprentice on the coast, and I know exactly what they are, and I am still going. Mother Salt comes up the slope and stops me in the open, in the doorway of the dome, in front of Wen and Pugo and 4 people at the stones. "You told this beach something about yourself once," she says. "You said you would never make a thing you knew would break in a face. Say it again now, out loud, with that one in your hand." I do not say it. I put the 4 of them down on the bench and I say nothing at all, and she waits long enough to be certain, and then she goes back down to the cistern without another word. 3 hours. I was 3 hours off cutting my own mark into a lens that was going to let go, and the only reason I did not is that a woman who could not read a hand at 10 paces a year ago walked up a hill to look at what I was doing. So I hit first instead, and it is the only time in any of this that I move on Anso before he has moved on me. I go to Tharn uninvited with the stones and the plank and Wen and 2 of Kel's 8, and I sit down on the beach below the boats. On the sand my brother rowed me off, and I say what I have come for in front of whoever is standing there to hear it. "Every person on this island who has been sold a pair out of a crate," I say, "bring them down. I will test the face and grind what the face actually needs and fit it myself, and it costs nothing, and it takes as long as it takes." 4 days. Marek calls the names, because Marek is the man on that island whose voice everybody obeys without noticing they are doing it, and he stands up on a boat with a pair of my glass on his face and calls them down one at a time. It is slow. It is unbelievably slow. 4 distances, both eyes, across 2 days, on a face I have never seen before, and some of them I cannot help at all and have to say so to them in front of their own families. 26 faces in 4 days. 9 of them go home with what they came down with, because what they came down with happens to suit them, and I tell them so, and I tell them who made it, and I do not take it off them. And the whole time there is a stack of crates 40 paces up that beach with 11 identical pairs in each of them, and every person on that sand can see both things at once, and nobody has to say a single word about it. Anso does not come down while I am there. Anso is out at Vantry for 3 of the 4 days, which is precisely where I would be. His answer comes 11 days later, and it is better than anything I would have thought of. His men start cutting 3 short strokes into the rim of every lens that goes out of Tharn. My mark. The one I have been putting on everything since the first mask, out of 20 years of habit, because in that workshop you marked your own so there could be no argument about whose bench a broken thing came off. And now there is no argument about anything at all, because there is no telling them apart. Not by a face, not by a thumb, not by holding one up against the light. A crate of 11 off Tharn and a pair off my own bench carry the same 3 cuts, and every island out here has been told for 2 months that the mark belongs to the burn, and they believe it, because it is true. And then the thin ones start to go. 2 crates inside a week. They do not break where anybody can see it coming. They let go all at once out of the middle. That is what glass does when it has been cooled in a hurry by men who have been told that a day of extra burning is a superstition. One of them lets go in a hand on Sab. The hand belongs to a boy of 14, and the pair belongs to his grandmother, and he is carrying it across a beach for her. He gets 9 cuts in the palm and 1 across the wrist, and he keeps every finger, and his hand is going to work again. His father rode in the watch off the kelp beds. His father is wearing one of the 6 pairs I ground and carried out there myself, and fitted on his face on his own sand, while his crew watched me do it. I go and get them back. That is what I do next, and I would do it again, and I also know exactly how it looks from a beach. 11 days, every island on this sea, 20 pairs taken back out of 20 faces by hand. I stand in doorways and on shingle, and I explain the cooling, and I say the word thin, and I promise them a ground pair off my own bench inside a month, and most of them let me have them. 2 do not. One of the 2 is Beale, who waited longer than anybody on my own island and who bought hers out of a crate off a Vantry boat because she got tired of standing behind 6 men from Sav. She looks at me over the top of them and asks whether I have come as the man who makes them or the man who takes them away. I tell her both. She keeps them, and I do not push it, and I go down the slope, and Pugo does not ask me how it went. 6 islands watch the burn taking glass back off old people. That is how it looks from a beach, because that is what it is. Anso does not have to say one word about it anywhere, and he never says one, and it goes round these islands inside 9 days. The kiln is cold by then. Everything I have is either on somebody's face or in a sack waiting to be ground again, and there is no fuel to spare and nothing at all for my hands, so I take the long blank out of the sack and start on that instead. A long weak one and a short strong one. I ground a pair like it once on a bench on the coast out of 2 lenses that belonged to somebody else's order, and I held them apart at arm's length, and the far wall came up close enough to count the nails in it. Then I put them both down and went back to work, because there is no living to be made in a thing that shows you a wall you could walk to in 9 paces. I sleeve the 2 of them in boiled leather at the distance where it comes clear, and I could not tell you why I am doing it. There is no face on this sea that needs it. Nobody has asked me for one, and nobody knows it exists. I stand it in the corner of the dome behind the pitch pot, and I do not think about it again for a month. On Vantry, a woman of 60 sits on a rock and is fitted by a man who is not me, out of a crate of 11, and the 3rd pair he tries on her is the one that suits her. He tells her they are the burn's own work. She holds them up against the light and finds the 3 cuts on the rim with her thumb, the way she has been told to check, and she is satisfied. She pays for them in salt, puts them back on, and walks home wearing them. 6 days later, that pair lets go while it is on her face. She loses the eye, and the mark on the pieces her daughter carries down to the water is mine. ID comes off Kel's boat at the worst possible hour of the worst possible morning, with a year of pitch in 4 sealed jars, and 2 shipwrights who will come after the ash, and a 3rd who would not come at any price. She has been 3 days at sea, and she does not look at the 4 hulls coming in from Vantry, and she does not wait for anybody to tell her what is happening on this beach. She has been carrying something for 3 days, and she puts it down first. There are gray sails tied up at the wharf on the coast, she says. 2 of them, unloading, buying rope and salt beef and a spare spar off a chandler who was pleased to see them, and there is a man down there who keeps a tally of what they bring in, and nobody on that quay thinks they are worth turning round for. They are not a horde on the coast, they are a trade. They have customers and prices and men who greet them by name, and the whole of what has been coming out of the ash at these islands for 4 generations is a business with a wharf and a chandler and a good reputation for paying. Nobody wants it. Not one person on that beach wants it today. 2 men tell her to be quiet, and one of them is Bram, and she stops, and she stands there holding it, and the boats from Vantry come up the sand. There are 4 of them, and there is not one weapon aboard any of them, and that is worth saying out loud, because this beach has already decided what is coming before the first bow touches the sand. What comes is 4 hulls, no arms, an old man in the bow of each of them, and a woman of about 60, sitting amidships with a cloth folded in her lap. Her name is Sinette. She has 1 eye and the other side of her face is wrapped, and her daughter is with her, and the cloth in her lap has the pieces of a pair of spectacles in it, and there are 3 cuts on the rim of the biggest one. I go to her. I get about 4 paces from that boat, and she turns her head away and puts a hand up, and her daughter steps between us, and I stop. She is right not to let me near her. I am the man whose mark is on the glass in her lap, and I am the man who came round every island taking glass off people, and there is no sentence I can say standing over her that is not a man explaining himself to a woman he has half blinded. So I stop where I am, and Mother Salt does the talking, and she does it because she is the only person on that beach with the standing to open her mouth. She has been blind, and then not blind. Nobody else out there has been both. What she says is not a defense of me. She does not mention me. She goes down the beach and stands where Senet can see her out of the eye she has left, and she offers her what she has, in the only currency she has ever dealt in. Half a ladle a day for as long as you want it, she says, a place at our fires, a seat at the racks that does not need two eyes, and time, as much of it as you need, and nobody on this island will ask you for anything while you are taking it. Senet refuses. She does it flatly, and she does it in front of 200 people, and she does not raise her voice above the noise of the water. She has a house on Vantry, she says. She has a daughter and a son and a boat, and she is not moving onto an ash heap to be fed by the people who made the thing that took her eye. She says the word made. She is not wrong to use it, and she is not being unreasonable, and every person on that sand can hear that she is not, and Mother Salt has nothing whatever after it. She stands there a moment and then goes and sits down on the flat rock. That is the first time since the morning she looked into her own ladle that the woman who has the last word on this island does not have one. ID picks up the cloth, and nobody gives it to her. She asks Senet's daughter, and the daughter looks at her mother, and Senet says something short that I cannot hear, and Ide sits down in the sand next to that boat with the pieces in her hands. She has ground 400 strokes to a lens for a year. She has counted them out loud through every one of them. There is nobody on this sea, including me, who has spent as many hours as she has with a wet stone and a disc between, and nobody who has looked at what a stroke leaves behind as long as she has. She has it in about the length of time it takes a person to breathe 6 times, and then she says it out loud to the beach. Twice, so that the back of it hears her as well as the front. The cut is shallow, she says, and she holds the piece up and runs her thumbnail across the 3 strokes on the rim. It has been scratched on afterwards, into a plate that had already gone hard, by somebody copying a mark he has seen and does not know the reason for. Ours go in while the glass is still soft. They go in deep enough that you feel them before you see them. Then she turns the biggest piece over and holds it against the light and says the second thing. The one that finishes it. It is ground across the wrong way, she says. The strokes run against the curve instead of round it. Whoever did this watched a wrist for 4 nights and never once asked why the wrist goes that way, and every lens out of that crate has the same wrong turn in it, and it is why they come apart in the middle. And then she does the thing that ends the whole argument, and it is not an argument at all. She stands up and hands the 2 pieces to the nearest man from Vantry and tells him to feel the rim with his thumb, and then to feel the rim of the pair on his own face. They go round that beach. 240 people and 4 boats of Vantry men and 11 off Sab, hand to hand, thumb to rim, and every single one of them can tell, and it takes about an hour, and nobody says very much while it is happening. Anso comes over from Tharn in the afternoon, and nobody sends for him. He comes because Marek tells him what is going on, and because he was always going to come, and he walks up the beach on his own with the cord in his hand. Somebody asks him straight out in front of the island, before he has got as far as the fires, "Did you put the Burns mark on your crates?" And he says yes. He does not hedge it, and he does not wait, and he does not ask who is asking. He says yes, and then he gives his reason, and his reason is a good one, and it is the truth, and it is what finishes him. Nobody out here would buy a lens that was not the Burns, he says. He had promised pairs to 4 crews in front of their own neighbors. He could make glass, and he could not make the name on it, and the name was the only thing anybody was buying. So he cut the name into what he made. He says all of that out loud on black sand in front of every person there, and every one of them understands it perfectly, and understanding it is exactly what destroys him. Because he has just told 6 islands that the mark means the maker, and that he knew it meant the maker, and that he put it on anyway. There is no shouting. Nobody lays a hand on him. 3 men off Vantry get up and walk away from where he is standing, and then 4 more, and after a while there is a space round a man of 61 on a beach, and that is all of it. He asks for one thing before he goes, and he asks me for it in front of everybody. "Leave me the water cure," he says. "I have nothing else. I do not want the glass, and I do not want a share of anything, and I am not asking to be forgiven by anybody here. leave me the water. And somebody in that crowd says out loud that we should take his eyes back off him. There are 240 people standing there, and not one of them answers it, and it hangs there long enough to become a thing that could happen. I say no before it can be discussed. I say it fast, because it is the only thing all day I know the answer to without having to think about it. And I say the rest of it as well, because I am not going to be the man who lets a beach believe he regrets something he does not. I gave him those, I say. Nobody asked me for them. I offered in front of 9 people because I wanted to be the man who handed the star reader his eyes, and he has done exactly what a man like him was always going to do with them, and I would do it again. I say that too, and I say it plainly, and the beach hears me say it, and I do not enjoy how quiet they go. Then somebody asked the question I have been waiting for all afternoon. How did he get the motion of a hand in the first place? The answer is a man I bought. I paid 8 heads for a pair of planks and cloth, and I set that price myself, and one of the 8 was a man Kel had had enough of, and he stood on my stones for 4 nights, and I never once looked at him or asked him his name. He is on Tharn. He is not coming back. Nobody punishes him for any of it, not that year and not after, and there is nothing to punish him with, because a man who was sold is not a man who broke a promise. I bought a person, I say, so I do not get to stand here being surprised by what the person did next. And that is all I have to say about Kor, and it is more than I said to him in the 4 nights he was on this beach. What comes out of that day is the only thing 6 islands have ever agreed on, and it is not proposed by me, and I am glad of that now. A mirror and a shielded lamp on the top of every one of them, manned through every ash, day and night, by whoever that island puts up there, and a man on each summit who can see the 2 summits either side of him and pass on what he is given. They build it in 9 days, and everybody builds it. Kel sends timber, Sab sends men, Vantry sends the 2 shipwrights I'd brought back before they have laid a single strake on anything of ours. I grind mirrors for 9 days, and I sleep about 4 hours a night, and I am not in charge of any of it. I am not consulted about 2 of the summits. They are put where Anso says they should be put, because he takes the bearings for them, and nobody sees any reason at all to ask a glassblower where a sightline goes. The ash starts 4 days early. It comes in on the wind before dawn, and by the middle of the morning every horizon out here has gone the color of a wet stone, and by noon you cannot see Tharn from this beach, and Tharn is 4 miles away, and you cannot look into it. That is the thing nobody ever explains about an ash month, because everybody out here has known it since they were 3. It gets in the eyes inside 4 breaths, and a man on a beach in an ash fall keeps his face down and his eyes shut and finds his way home by his feet. On the rail off Tharn, Merrick sits in the ash with his coat over his head and counts, because his mouth counts whether he wants it to or not. There is a rhythm coming across the water that is not a fishing boat's and not a Tharn boat's. He counts it up to 9, and then he stops. He cannot see a thing. 2 of the summits are not finished. Vantry's is a stack of stone with no mirror on it, and Delm's has a mirror and nobody standing next to it, and every island on this sea has just gone blind for a month. And the only people out here who can hold their eyes open in a falling ash are on the beach that 6 islands throw things away on. 9 days into the ash, I go up the North Ridge to find out whether Vantry has got a mirror onto its summit yet, and I take the long glass out of the corner of the dome because there is nothing else on this island that will let me look at anything. You cannot open your eyes into a falling ash. That is the whole of why nobody has ever seen them coming, and it has taken me a year on this rock to work out that it was never about distance and never about the dark. It is that a man out here spends a month with his face down and his eyes shut. I have a plate of thin glass in a leather hood strapped over my face and the tube through a slot in it, and I look like something that has crawled out from under a boat, and I can hold my eyes open in it for as long as I like. Vantry's summit is bare. I find that out in the first minute, and I stand there swearing about it into a hood. Then I turn south and west out of habit. along the line where the light goes from gray to a slightly different gray, and there is something in it that has an edge. An ash haze has no edges. Everything in it goes soft at the same rate, and that is what makes it what it is. And the thing I am looking at has a top and a bottom, and it is the wrong color, and it does not move the way weather moves. I have it for about 4 breaths, and then I lose it, and then I find it again. And by then I am on my knees on the ridge with the tube braced on a stone, and it is a sail, and behind it there is another one. Pugo comes up. Pugo comes up because Pugo always comes up, and he takes the tube off me, and he cannot see anything through it at first, and then he can, and then he starts counting out loud on the ridge in the ash the way he counts everything. 9, he says. Then 11, because 2 more come out of it while he is still on 9. Then 13, and he stops at 13 and takes the tube off his eye and hands it back to me and says nothing else at all. A day and a half out. That is what the glass buys. Every island out here has had, at most, 1 hour of warning from the last 4 generations of this, and 1 hour is the time it takes a fleet to cross the last stretch of open water once somebody on a beach hears an oar. We light the Burns summit before dark, and Ide stands the mirror behind the lamp and turns it by hand, and the summit on Sab answers inside a quarter of an hour. Sab passes it to Kel. Kel passes it to Oso, and Oso has a boat rowing for Delm before the middle of the night, because Delm's mirror is finished, and there is nobody standing next to it. The warning crosses every island between dusk and first light. It used to take 3 days, and it used to be carried by men in boats, and it used to cost 2 or 3 of them every generation, and I give it away. That is the only thing in all of it that I do for the politics of it, and I do it deliberately, standing on the ridge with the tube in my hand while Ide is turning the mirror. Everything, I say. Numbers, bearing, how long. To all 6, free, and nobody has to ask for it, and nobody owes anything for it afterwards. And Tharn gets it at the same moment as Kel does. Mother Salt says that is the most expensive thing anybody has ever given away out here. Then she goes down and starts moving 240 people off a beach. By dawn on the 2nd day, there is not a person standing on any beach on any of these islands. Everybody is inland or up a slope or behind a ridge with the day's water carried up in jars. And every hull that floats is out on the water in the lee of an island with men aboard her, waiting in an ashfall where nobody can see them either. Before I go up the slope, I put a square of smoked glass into Vel's hand on the shingle. It is thin and dark and bound round the edge with leather so that it cannot cut anybody. It is no use at all for seeing better. It is the only thing I have made in a year that lets a person look into a falling ash without their eyes shutting on them by themselves. For the girl, I say. He puts it inside his shirt and pushes off and does not say anything about it, and that is the whole of the conversation. Hasek comes into our beach first, because ours is the beach he has always come into. 4 generations of it. He knows the water, he knows the shelf, and he knows there is nobody on this island that anybody else wants back. He does not attack. That is the thing nobody down the years has ever put in the tellings. He runs 2 hulls up the black sand in a falling ash, and he steps off and he walks up the beach at a comfortable pace, and then he stops about halfway and waits. He waits to be greeted. He stands in an ashfall on an empty beach with 240 people up the slope watching him through the gray, and he waits to be spoken to properly, and while he waits he prices what he can see. He counts on his fingers where people can see him doing it. 4 for the young men, 2 for the older ones. He taps his own front teeth with a fingernail between the numbers, and he does it out loud, pleasantly, as a man reads a list he has read many times. And Mother Salt walks down that slope on her own with the ladle in her hand and a jar under her arm, and nobody stops her, because nobody on that slope is quick enough to work out what she is doing until she is halfway down. She greets him, and she does it properly and by name, because we have had a day and a half to find out what his name is. I'd brought it back off a chandler on the coast 3 months ago and did not know what she was carrying. "Good morning, Hasek," she says. He straightens up, and he is delighted. He greets her back, and he is courteous about it, and he apologizes to her for the ash. Then she fills the ladle out of the jar and gives him half of it, and stands there and watches him drink it. "Half," she says. Everyone gets half. And out in the anchorage on the other side of that gray, 11 more hulls are lying at their anchors in a dead calm with their sails hanging, packed in close because the ash has taken the visibility down to nothing, and no captain out there will risk being separated from the others. They cannot see 50 paces, neither can we. The difference is that we have 4 men on this sea with glass over their faces and one long tube, and they have 4 generations of doing this to people who could not look up. Nobody offers Anso the fireboat, nobody discusses him, and nobody forgives him anything, and his name is not raised in front of anybody. He simply puts himself on the hull. He walks down to Tharn's beach in the ash with the cord in his hand, and takes the one boat that has been loaded with 2 jars of Ide's pitch and 8 loads of coal, and the sweepings off my slope. Then he tells the 2 men aboard her where to put their oars, and they do it, because he is the only man alive who can hold a bearing in a falling ash, and every single person on that beach knows it. I find out he is out there an hour after the boat has gone, Marek tells me. Marek says it as he says everything, flat, at the same speed, and then he goes and sits down on the sand and does not talk to anybody. It is one ship. That is what nobody believes afterwards, and that is all of it. And Anso does not go anywhere near the fleet. He takes that hull round the outside in a dead calm and comes in on the far side of the anchorage, where their own hulls stand between them and him, and he lays a boat carrying 8 loads of coal and 2 jars of pitch, alongside one gray sail at 20 paces before a soul aboard her knows there is a boat on the water. Ide's lamp does the rest. A shielded flame is the only fire on this sea that will still be burning after a crossing like that, and it goes into 2 jars of pitch and 8 loads of coal packed under an oiled sail, and Anso and 2 men off Tharn go over the side and swim. 13 wooden ships at anchor in a windless bay with one of them burning, and there is no worse thing that can happen to a fleet anywhere on any water. They cannot make way because there is no wind. They cannot see because the ash is doing to them exactly what it has done to these islands every year since anybody can remember. And they cannot get clear of each other because they have anchored close on purpose so as not to be separated. 2 of them foul each other trying to warp out. One goes onto the shelf off Oso in the dark with a hole in her. The rest of them cut and go in every direction in ash without a navigator between them who has ever needed to see this water in his life. Hasek is on our beach for the whole of it. He knows before we do. He stops in the middle of a number and turns his head and stands there in the ash listening to something 4 miles away that not one person on that slope can hear yet. Then he asks Mother Salt politely whether he may go, and he asks it as a man asks to be excused from a table, and nobody kills him. 240 people come down that slope with kelp knives and racking hooks, and Pugo's whole crew, and not one of them is asked to use any of it, because he has 2 hulls on our sand, and 11 at the bottom of a mess he cannot see, and the water is doing his work for him. He goes back onto the water with 2 hulls and nothing in them, and Mother Salt walks down to the tide line beside him and tells him, by name, quietly and in the open, exactly what the greeting was worth. He is not to come back in the ash, she says. He is not to come back out of it either. And if he ever comes to this beach again, he can come the way anybody comes, in daylight, and be greeted, and get half a ladle, and buy what he can pay for. He taps his teeth once, and does not answer that, and pushes off, and that is the last anybody on these islands sees of a gray sail. On Tharn, in the ash, Ness stands at the water's edge with a square of smoked glass held up to one eye, and her other hand flat over the other eye, and she watches an orange light out on the water go up, and spread, and travel along. Her mother is inside with the door shut. Every other person on that beach has a face turned down and a coat over the head. She is 11, and she is the only one standing out there who can see what is happening, and she stays in it until it is over. Anso comes off the fireboat last. He swims a 1/4 of a mile in a falling ash on a bearing he holds in his head, and he comes up our beach on his own feet. black to the elbows, with his eyes shut against the gray, and his hand out in front of him, feeling for a rail that is not there. By the third morning the ash has thinned enough to see Tharn, and there are boats on our sand from every one of the islands, and the elders are standing on black sand in the gray light waiting for it to lift. They cannot see each other's faces. Not one of them can get through an hour of talking to 5 other old men in an ashfall without the thing that is made on this beach, and every one of them has worked that out on the way over. The Council of 6 Islands is held on the burn, and it is held here for a reason that has nothing to do with anybody's respect for this beach. 6 old men cannot get through an afternoon of talking to each other in an ash haze without seeing each other's faces, and the only place on this sea where you can be handed a thing that lets you do that is a slope on a heap of cinder that all of them have been sending people to for 4 generations. They sit on the black sand in a rough ring because there is nowhere else and nobody builds anything for it. East of Kel and Oral for Tharn's boats, and the 4 others, and around them the island getting on with the racks. 2 of those 6 raised a hand at a vote in an afternoon a year ago. I know which 2. They know which 2. Nobody says one word about it at any point, and everybody there is aware of it the whole time, which is better than saying it and would have been ruined by saying it. Is thirsty about the middle of the morning, and the water comes to him from the jar, and it is poured by one of the 8 people he sold, a man of about 50 who could not see his own hands in the spring and who is wearing a pair off my bench. He pours it without spilling a drop. Is thanks him. The man says nothing at all, and goes back with the jar, and the 2 of them do not look at each other once, and neither of them mentions it, then or afterwards. What gets decided is small, and it is all physical. The only kind of decision that has ever held out here. The breath is paid work from now on, and the Burns crew runs it, and the take goes 1 in 3, because Mother Salt says 1 in 3, and this time, nobody sits there working out whether to argue. Any boy off any island who wants to go down at it may still go down at it. Oral puts that in and nobody objects, and it costs the crews nothing, and it leaves the thing standing as something a boy chooses instead of something a boy has to survive. The bird cliffs are held in common, and the north end stays shut in the nesting season, and the eggs go to whoever has children, and that is Mother Salt's, and she does not have to say very much to get it. And every summit is manned in every ash from the first gray to the last, and the men who stand up there eat out of the common store of whichever island they are standing on. Nothing is written down. There is nothing on these islands to write with and nothing to write on, and there never has been. 6 men said it out loud, on sand, in front of 240 witnesses, and out here that is stronger than anything you could put on a hide. Marek is asked to keep the count of the crews. He is the obvious man, and everybody says so at once, and he gets up in the middle of a ring of elders and asks his question for the 2nd time in a year. Can I stop counting now? He says. And Pugo takes it off him. He does not ask anybody, and he does not make anything of it. He simply says that he will do it, because he does the cruise anyway, and he has been doing the cruise since he was 9, and then he says the day's numbers out loud straight away, so that there is nothing left to discuss. Marek sits down. He sits down on the black sand in the middle of 6 islands, and he says nothing else for the rest of that morning, and he is still wearing my spectacles, and he watches everything. The hull is finished 11 days later, on the sand at the north end, with about 90 people standing round it, who have nothing whatever to do with boat building. 60 planks, 40 of them kells, and 4 hides, and a year of pitch less the 2 jars that went out on the fireboat, and 2 shipwrights off the coast who stayed 8 weeks and taught 4 of ours while they were at it. It is not beautiful. It is heavy, and it is slow, and it is going to leak at the garboard for the first month because it always does. It will cross 3 days of open water with cargo and come back, and it is the first thing this island has ever owned that does not need anybody's permission. The first thing it carries is not cargo, and nobody on this beach has to be told what it is going to carry, because Mother Salt settled that out loud a month ago and dared anybody to open their mouth about it. Belle takes it across across to Tharn on the morning tide with 4 of the crew, and he brings my sister over, and he brings her in daylight in front of the whole beach with Tharn watching, which is the only way anything has ever been done out here. Ness is 11, and she comes up the black sand with a bundle and the sealed jar in the crook of her arm, and she has the square of smoked glass on a cord round her neck, and she has not taken it off since the ash. She says Kier, and then she does not say anything else for a while. Vel does not stay, I ask him. He stands there with his hand on the bow of a hull he helped carry planks for, and he gives me 4 words about it. Our mother will not. That is the whole of it, and it is enough, and he goes back on the afternoon tide, and the arrangement after that is that he comes across twice a month, and it holds for as long as any of this holds. 3 nights after that, a storm gets up out of the southwest, well out beyond Delm, and Delm's summit is the one that sees it first. The summit nobody had a man on when the ash came. Delm passes it to Oso, and Oso passes it to Kel, and Kel passes it round the ring. I am up on our ridge with Ide when it reaches us, and what you see is a light on a black hill 4 miles off going bright and dark and bright in a rhythm that means weather and not sails, then our own mirror answering it, then Sab answering us, and then the whole of it running away round the edge of the world in the dark. 6 hills, 6 flames, over black water, in about the time it takes to walk down a slope. That warning used to go by boat. It took 3 days, and it was carried by men who did not always arrive. And I have stood on this beach and watched 2 hulls come home in pieces off exactly the kind of night that is being handed round the sky over my head. It is the quietest thing I have ever watched happen, and it is the loudest thing this sea has ever done. Not one boat is caught out that night, not one off 6 islands, and Merrick is the man who says that number the next morning, out loud, at the same speed as every other number. The elders come back at the end of the season and sit on our sand again, and they do it in daylight with the ash long gone and no need in it at all except that this is where it is done now. I stand up the slope and watch 6 old men sit down in a ring on black sand that a year ago had 151 people on it and no wood and no spring, and I am not in the ring and I am not asked to be. And Ide is next to me with her stones in her lap and does not say anything about it either. Beale gets her pair. She gets it 4 days after the ash lifts, and she stands at the plank for the 4 distances first, both eyes on 2 days, and she does not let me hurry any of it. Senate does not come. Her daughter comes in the autumn, and I test her, and she goes short, and I grind her a pair, and she takes it home. There is no message with her either way. That is where it stands, and I do not expect it to move. And it does not. Anso keeps the water. He lays the courses for the long crossings and the summit bearings, and nobody else touches either, and he does not come to this island, and he is on Tharn's beach every time our hull goes in, standing at the back telling somebody where to put a boat. Bram meets every boat. He is the first face anybody sees on this island, and he still gets 2 things out of 3 wrong, and he still wears the pair I ground for the wrong eyes, and nobody has ever taken them off him, and nobody ever will. Hun holds the Burn summit through every ash after that one, and he is the man who takes the storm off Sab the night it goes round, and he tells the whole of it afterwards to anybody who will stand still, in the wrong order, starting at the mountain. I stand still for it now, not always, and not always well, and I ask him things out loud, by name, in front of whoever is there, because that is the only currency he has ever wanted, and it costs me nothing except the time, and I have been the man who was too busy for that once already. Tog hauls kelp, and Tog will go on hauling kelp until he cannot lift a bag, and he tells the joke about how the island feeds itself to every new arrival who comes off a boat. None of them understand it. He does not explain it. He laughs at it alone, the same way, every time, and it has been dead for a year, and I would not have it taken off him for anything on this sea. The strip of sand at the north end of this beach is where the Exile boat used to unload, and it is where everything lands now. Planks come in there, pitch, grain off the coast, old men off Vantry with their sons holding an elbow each. Every person who has come to this island this year because somebody told them there was a beach out here where a man will look at your eyes. Ness sits on it most mornings, on the flat rock at the top of it, with the jar beside her, which she has still not opened and which she has told me twice she is not going to. She sits there because the boats come in, and she likes counting them, a thing she has started doing since she got here and nobody taught her. And Mother Salt says the count. She says it every morning of that year the way she has said it every morning for 21 years, standing up on the rock with the ladle in her hand to a beach that has got too long to hear all of it at once. 306, she says, and then she stops in the middle of it and stands there with the ladle, and she is not counting, and she is not lost. She has come to the last of it, and she is looking away down the beach at the flat rock at the north end, where a girl is sitting in the sun counting boats. And Nez, I say, and she says it after me.
They rowed a boy out to a dead island because he could not hold his breath for 30 seconds, and what they threw away with him was the only pair of hands on that sea that knew what black sand was for. But look at what he does with the winning. He hands it over one face at a time, and every time he hands it over for the wrong reason, somebody else pays. A man can be right about the work every day of his life and still be wrong about people in public 4 times over and never buy it back with a clever move. What he ends with is not a kingdom. It is a beach where the boats come in, an old woman who cannot finish a number, and a girl on a rock where the exile boat used to unload.